about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field. Put your foot down." This rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its 2 front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, cripes, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as the family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred? How do you get spurred by a rooster?
One here from Dan in Hampshire. Morning, Mike. As an Aussie that has been dive-bombed by our version of the Magpie, which is much bigger, every springtime.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome to Morning Glory. It is coming up to 3 minutes past 6. The day is upon us, ladies and gentlemen. Thursday, the 24th of April. A very, very good morning to you. Here we are at Talk, the home of common sense. And there was some common sense spoken yesterday in the Houses of Parliament. We'll bring you all of that. Kemi Badenoch accused Keir Starmer of not having enough balls to do the job that he is required to do. He's betrayed all sorts of people ever since he became Prime Minister on July the 4th of last year. Today, there's yet another betrayal on the way, and it will be, of course, the one that he's going to give to the Brexiteers. The people who voted to leave the European Union back in 2016, the people who knew that what they didn't want in the future was to be shackled to an organisation which was completely and utterly unrealistic, undemocratic and completely bombastic when it comes to running your own country. They wouldn't want you to be able to have the rights to actually determine what it is that you want to do and how you want to live. No, no, no. What they'd like to do is to tell you have to do exactly what the French do, what the Germans do, what Italians do, what the Spanish do, and we'll tell you if you're doing something wrong. We'll fine you if you don't do it right. And that's the bare bones of the European Union, ladies and gentlemen. Today, Ursula von der Leyen, as I like to call her, who is the head of the EU, will be coming to Downing Street to meet up with Sir Keir Starmer because he is going to be trying to get ever closer ties with the European Union, which we actually voted to leave many, many moons ago. Almost 10 years ago now. It seems ridiculous that we're still fighting over it, but we're talking about that in the papers this morning. An awful lot of stories around about the situation in Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky is a key obstacle to a peace deal, says Donald Trump. Front page of the Times. The front page of the Daily Telegraph has got Trump, Zelensky to blame for no peace. And even the Daily Mail's going with back my peace or lose all of Ukraine. Warning from Donald Trump. We'll get stuck into that as well. Lots of other stories on the front pages. Freddie Flintoff's on the front page of the Sun. Talking about how when he had his terrible accident, he thought his whole face had come off, which is a bit nasty. Also, we'll continue with the reverberations from the trans debate. All of it took place yesterday, of course, in Parliament, but also it's still going on. Hospitals threatening to defy the Supreme Court. Trans runners running in the London Marathon this weekend, and all sorts of other things going on. We'll be talking about noisy phone users. We'll be talking about children getting a curfew for their social media as well. It's all kicking off. It's 5 minutes past 6. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. And of course, one of the things we've become famous for here at Morning Glory are your voice notes, the things that come in every single day from all over the country. Have a listen to this.
Morning, Mike. Sean from Grimsby here.
Morning, Mike. Laura in Wiltshire.
Morning, Mike. Mick from Lincolnshire here.
Good morning, Mike. I'm a bit furious.
Morning, Mike. Disgruntled Justin from Halifax here.
Morning, Mike. Melissa from Cambridge.
Morning, Mike. It's Carl in Manchester.
Keep those coming. 0344 499 1000. It is literally the voice of the people, this show, because we care what you actually think, unlike most other people who run media organisations in this country. Rafe Heidelmanku is here with us as well to help us get through all the big stories in the paper. So let us get right to it. Welcome to Morning Glory. Rafe, a very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Some very bad news for you, I'm afraid, though. Keir Starmer's trying to pull us ever closer back in. It's like that, that scene in Godfather 3 when he says, Al Pacino goes, I keep trying to get out, but it keeps dragging me back in. And he can't get out of the criminal underworld in the same way that we can't seem to get out from the weeds of the European Union.
And we have the godmother literally coming over now, the failed German politician. I mean, it's not the failed, the head of the EU Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, to shed some of her magic. And, even she makes Keir Starmer look quite good, actually, because she's such a poisonous creature.
I mean, at least he actually won an election. I mean, you can say many things about Starmer, but at least he actually won an election.
But yeah, looking at the picture of these two shaking hands, I mean, my God, that's a dinner party you really don't want to be at with those sort of two characters there. Although you have to say, actually, could life in the EU be any worse than it is?
Well,
because on so many issues, actually, he's outperforming the EU in terms of stupidity. The EU don't want to go to net zero before 2035. He's trying to get us there by 2030. So there are a lot of wacky policies that he and Ed Miliband have that even the European Union looks at and thinks, hang on, chap, that's going a bit far.
I know. But, I mean, so far, since he's been involved in running the country, I presume this particular meeting will involve talks about fishing rights, because we've already decided we're going to give more fishing rights back to the French in order to then do a new defence deal. He's already talking about doing a net zero deal with Europe. He's already talking about doing a food standards deal with Europe. Where did he get the impression that this is what anybody in Britain wants?
Well, we had something called a referendum. I don't know if you remember that.
I do remember that.
It was in the papers for a couple of days, I think.
Yeah.
And he seems to have completely forgotten about that. Look, the big Brexit betrayal we had was under the Conservative government, and you thought at one point things couldn't possibly get any worse.
Yeah.
Well, yes, they could.
Yes.
You could actually go backwards rather than just being stagnant.
Yeah.
And that's precisely what Starmer's doing here. Make no mistake, all of this is being done to bring us ever so closer back into a stage where it could be conceivable that we re-enter in some capacity or another. And the key requirement from the EU to do that is to standardise everything that we have, our food standards and everything else. It is to do things, as you said, giving them fishing rights. These were the fishing rights first given away by Ted Heath when he was crawling to get into the common market. And, our fishermen were those who actually voted for Brexit desperately on this issue. Those poor fishermen, whose livelihoods they saw hammered away by the EU, will now be back to square one after all that suffering.
Well, we spoke to a fisherman on the show yesterday down the south coast, and he said that, there was some progress made under the Tories, that actually it seemed as though they did have some more, powers than they had before. He said, but this will basically take all of that away. And he said how depressing it was to go out on the fishing boats that they do in the middle of the night. They work incredibly hard, these people, round the clock. It's a tough job, it's a rough job, it's a dangerous job. And he said, you can't describe how sort of, mind-blowingly frustrating it is when you get out to the place where you want to fish off the coast of Dover, for example, and all you can see is European fishing boats. The Spanish are there, the French are there, the Belgians are there, basically everybody's already there. And then the only other thing you see is French military boats escorting migrant boats on their way over here full of people who are coming to this country illegally.
Yeah, are they going back with fish? I don't know.
Well,
you've got to wonder what happens to the boats afterwards.
But it's, he says it feels like
terrible.
We're losing on every front.
And it's so sad because we went through such a hard struggle to get where we are, and we never took advantage of the opportunities that Brexit offered us.
Yeah.
And of course we were completely sideswiped by COVID almost immediately after.
Yes.
Then of course we had the Ukraine war, spiking energy prices, inflation related to quantitative easing, to printing more money and so forth. So we've been through huge economic high winds. But that wasn't because of Brexit, and it seems as if the Labour Party thinks that all of our woes are because of Brexit, therefore we must unwind it all and rewind it all. all know, we need to take advantage of these great opportunities that we have.
Exactly right. And we know that from the tariffs to the vaccines, if you want to bring, whenever these, very boring FBPE types say, well, can you mention one thing that was good about Brexit? Well, we've got lower tariffs from America, and we've got our vaccines sorted out. Whether or not you agreed with the vaccines is not the point. The point is we were more efficient at doing it, and we weren't hidebound by ridiculous European Union rules. Reeves, on the front page of the Telegraph, Rachel Reeves, who's in Washington, D.C. at the moment, is also saying that she's going to look at a youth mobility scheme to allow Europeans to temporarily live and work in the UK. I mean, have they never learned anything, these people? When you offer people the right to temporarily live and work in the UK, they never leave. They come here, and it's not temporary. This is the same people who offer, work visas to people who come, and then when they overstay the work visa, we give them a room in a hotel. When they overstay their student visa, we give them a room in a hotel until they can claim asylum. We've got to stop offering people the chance to come and live and work here, haven't we?
Yeah, what do you think? Well, unfortunately, this is the key requirement that the EU have for anything. Yeah. But you're absolutely right. I mean, to be fair, I've never really had that much of an issue with the youth mobility scheme. Because there are at least people coming from a European culture who are quite homogenous with our own culture.
Well, you say
to
that,
a degree,
but it may not be the case anymore because there are people.
I said I never used to be. The problem now, of course, is there are many people living in Europe who shouldn't be in Europe.
Yes,
and they're probably the ones who'd be most likely to take advantage of this scheme, which is why I think now it's an absolute disaster.
Because you can imagine the kind of the wrestling and the kind of the quandaries people will have when you go, well, here's some people coming from Germany, and you go, oh, are you German passport holders? Well, no, but we've been given permission to live and work in Germany, so now we're coming to live and work in Britain.
Precisely. Very few of them will be called Hans and Fritz.
No, and how are you going to tell how long they can stay for, and what are you going to do with them when they've refused to leave? That's the problem.
And as far as we understand, that is the one non-negotiable issue, is this youth mobility scheme for Ursula von der Slimy.
Yeah.
And I really worry now that we may be getting this, because, of course, we know how desperate many Labour backbenchers are on this issue, and what pressure they're applying on Starmer to do something like this.
Yeah, because there are lots of people inside of Labour who we know are much more akin to the European model of the way to live than, say, the American model, and they're looking over at Donald Trump and saying, well, he doesn't care about Britain, so we should align ourselves closer to Brussels.
Yeah, and just remember, the left are internationalists. They don't believe in the nation states.
No.
They don't believe in borders. Many of them believe in no borders. Right, and this is just open borders, quite literally.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yesterday was a big day in Parliament, so let's move on to that, because some of you may have missed it. It was Prime Minister's questions yesterday, and because of what had gone before, Keir Starmer getting absolutely roasted in the Commons on Tuesday by Kemi Badenoch, even though he wasn't actually there because he didn't have the cojones to show up. Here she is asking him the very question that I said she should ask him. This was yesterday morning. I said, what you've got to do is ask him if he was wrong when he wrongly interpreted the law, where he said back in 2022, not only is a trans woman a woman, but it's the law that says that. Have a look.
Mr. Speaker, does the Prime Minister now accept that when he said that it was the law that trans women were women, he was wrong?
Well, Mr. Speaker, let me be clear. I welcome the Supreme Court ruling on this issue. It brings clarity and it will give confidence to women and, of course, to service providers. The Equality and Human Rights Commission will now issue updated guidance, and it's important that that happens and that all service providers then act accordingly. This government's approach and my approach has been as follows: to support and implement the Supreme Court ruling, and we will; to continue to protect single-sex spaces based on biological sex, and we will; but also to ensure that trans people are treated with respect, and we will; and to ensure that everybody is given dignity in their everyday lives. I do think this is the time now to lower the temperature, to move forward, and to conduct this debate with the care and compassion that it deserves. And I think that should unite the whole House.
Yeah, so he basically ran away on that question. He did not answer the question, was he wrong? Which he clearly was. Considering that he's supposed to be this great lawyer, how is he getting it so wrong? He interpreted it the way he wanted to interpret it. That's what happened.
Yeah, well, we now know what sorry means. It means we welcome the clarity.
Yes.
That's the new definition of sorry.
Yeah, absolutely right.
And, we don't want him to welcome the clarity. We want him to provide clarity. He's had, years to provide clarity in his statements on this. He's been asked the question so many times. This is not leadership. He's hiding behind the skirts of the Supreme Court.
Yes.
and basically he's allowing basically other people to speak for him, when we know, quite frankly, he doesn't have the courage, the moral conviction, is pure cowardice. This is not what we expect from our leaders. We expect our leaders to actually take a principled stance, particularly when you know that the majority of the public are supportive of this position at all. You know who also needs to apologise is the Speaker of the House, Lindsay Hoyle, because Rosie Duffield, who was the MP who was kicked out of the Labour Party for basically saying what the Supreme Court said, and what anyone with common sense thinks. She stood up about 40 times to ask a question in the House of Commons. She obviously got the eye. She was the lady of the hour, and the Speaker did not call her.
Because everybody was looking at her while these statements were being made.
And she's now sitting behind Nigel Farage because she's not allowed on the Labour benches. So Starmer was talking about Nigel quite a few times, so he could hardly have missed her either, which probably made him squirm. And the way that the Speaker of the House didn't call upon her, I think, is disgraceful. Questions should be asked about it.
Well, I'm going to ask questions about it because Rosie Duffield's on the show later on, so we'll find out from her. But let's have a look at what Keir Starmer's apology looks like when you ask him to apologise to Rosie Duffield.
Will he now apologise to the member for Canterbury, the very brave member for Canterbury, for hounding her out of the Labour Party simply for telling the truth?
Mr. Speaker, I've always approached this on the basis that we should treat everyone with dignity and respect, whatever their different views, and I'll continue to do so. And I'll tell you, Mr. Speaker, for why. Because when we lose sight of that approach and make this a political football, as happened in the past, then we end up with the spectacle of a decent man, and he was a decent man, the previous Prime Minister, diminishing himself at this dispatch box by making trans jokes whilst the mother of a murdered trans teenager watched from the public gallery just up there. That will never be my approach. My approach will be to support the ruling, to protect single-sex spaces and treat everybody with dignity and respect. And I believe there's a consensus in this House and the country for that approach.
See, he believes there's a consensus in this House and the country for what he's doing. He's completely wrong about that on every single count. He didn't apologise to Rosie Duffield. She said earlier in the day she didn't expect him to apologise because he hasn't got the grace, he hasn't got the humility, and he's far too arrogant and to understand that he got it so wrong that he needs to row back an awfully long way on this.
Yeah, I mean, there's pure deflection in there, of course, and he says we don't want to make this into a political football. He then kicks a football about Rishi Sunak immediately after having said that.
I know.
And to speak about...
It shows you what sort of person he is, I think.
Yeah, and to speak about giving people dignity when he's being asked to apologise to someone who was treated in the most undignified manner. Poor Rosie Duffield. I mean, a terribly courageous woman who went through...
Whose life was in danger.
Life was endangered. Trans radical activists attacking her. Members of the backbench Labour Party appallingly treating her, cold-shouldering her and calling for all sorts of things to be done about her. I think Lisa Nandy as well and others were very vicious about her. None of them seem to be contrite or offering any contrition. And as I say, not even the Speaker calling upon this woman who's named in PMQs doesn't get a chance to put her own point across.
Shocking. And talking of Lisa Nandy, basically Lisa Nandy signed a controversial pledge by the Labour campaign for trans rights, which called for the members to be kicked out of the party if they belong to gender-critical hate groups, i.e. people like Rosie Duffield. And so they call a gender-critical hate group a group of people who actually tell the truth about something, as later supported by the Supreme Court. Because this is more hypocrisy from Labour, who say, well, we've always stood up for single-sex spaces for women. Well, here's what Lisa Nandy says. She's fundamentally believed in people's right to self-ID as the gender of their choice. I think trans women are women. I think trans men are men. So I think they should be accommodated in a prison of their choosing.
Yeah, I mean...
You know, that's pretty black and white, isn't it?
And these imagine calling these groups hate groups, you know, which are now actually supported by the Supreme Court's own ruling on this. Yeah, truth groups. You know, J.K. Rowling said Nandy was one of the biggest reasons why women were leaving the left.
Right.
And what I love about Lisa Nandy is now, while backtracking, she says, we're all perfectly capable of understanding what a woman is.
Yeah.
Well, really?
Really?
That's not what the evidence shows.
And she now says that the reason that she's changed her view is that she understood that the law said something else. So, in other words, I was wrong. Why can't they just say I was wrong in my interpretation of the law because Keir Starmer told me this is how I had to interpret it?
Well, they do say she's on the way out because she basically doesn't do any work in her office. So maybe she's got more free time, she can read up on biology.
I can't actually think of anything that Lisa Nandy's done while she's been Minister for Media, Culture and Sport. Can you? I don't think she's done anything.
Well, that's because you're not in the media, so you never get any chance to.
Let's have a final look at Kemi Badenoch asking this question: how can we take Labour seriously?
He talks about my predecessor, what about the abuse I faced from his MPs calling me a transphobe for supporting what the Supreme Court has now clarified in his words? And where was he? He hid for 6 days without commenting on the Supreme Court judgment. Why did it take him so long to respond? Isn't it because he was scared?
Yes. Mr. Speaker, the only fiction here is the idea she delivered anything in office. She held the post of Minister for Women and Equalities for 2 years, and she did precisely nothing. She provided no clarity on the law, did nothing to improve women's lives, which got materially worse under her watch. They talk, for example, about hospitals and mixed-sex wards, uphill and down Dale. What happened in the last decade? The use of mixed-sex wards in our NHS rose by 2,000%. And there's a pattern of behaviour here. Women and Equalities Minister failed to do anything for women. The Trade Minister, who failed to get a trade deal with the US. The Business Minister, who failed to get a deal with British Steel. She's a spectator, not a leader.
I mean, he's got a nerve, hasn't he, to talk to Kemi Badenoch like that when he has achieved the square root of bugger all, frankly, other than completely crashing the economy, thanks to Rachel Reeves, you know, taking every single group of people in this country who ought to be protected and unprotecting them and making their lives more miserable, costing everybody more money, making the borders less secure. I mean, I could go on and on for hours on this. I can't think of one thing that he's done to improve the lot of anyone. He's now, his latest this week is, we're giving free school breakfast to everybody. Well, one, they're not free, we're paying for them, and two, nobody's asked for them.
Yeah, there's been a catalogue of failures, his entire premiership. I mean, the thing is, you could see he was treading water there. This was probably one of the most uncomfortable PMQs he's been in for a long time.
Yeah.
And it was
probably her best.
And it was her best. As someone said on Twitter, you know, she had a Weetabix this morning because she actually was performing on fire.
Yeah.
I think if you get more of that, you know, maybe some of the discussions about replacing her may somewhat abate. That was a very good performance, and she did defend herself very well and said some of the things that she had done as Equalities Minister, which maybe you might be showing later on, I don't know. But of course we have to say, none of them come out shining, actually. Both of them have been responsible for this. We have to remember, of course, the Tories were also in a quandary.
Well, there
about
were
these
plenty of Tories,
issues.
I mean, Penny Mordaunt got up in Parliament and said, you know, trans woman is a woman, you know, so they weren't all entirely, you know, as they are now, rewriting history. It is extraordinary, isn't it, how slippery many of them are. Robert in Hitchin says, morning, Mike. Trying to get Starmer to answer a straightforward question is like asking him to draw a straight line. It would be so wobbly, it would probably spell something. Tell us what it would say. It would probably say help. Because he does need help, doesn't he?
Well, it'll be a big U. He's used to U-turns, isn't he?
I mean, I was watching Yvette Cooper and Angela Rayner sitting either side of him yesterday in Parliament, and neither one of them were, you know how they normally nod very enthusiastically? They were being quite sort of sedate, and they weren't really reacting at all to what he was saying.
Well, they had faces like slapped fish, didn't they?
They did.
Mean, they just looked so dour and dour, because I think for all of them, they're embarrassed. They don't know how to proceed on all of this.
Yes.
And I think they realised the game was up, you know.
Yeah, absolutely right. We'll come back to that in a minute. Best of mornings to you, Mr. Graham, says Marco in Swindon. I think it's false when people say that Keir Starmer constantly lies through his teeth. That is simply not true at all. How can somebody lie through their teeth when they talk through their nose? Well, it's a very good one. Morning, Mike. So Keir isn't the best at PMQs, but today he was on the ropes with Kemi coming out swinging and connecting every verbal blow. He looked like a person beaten after 5 long years in office and a government falling apart, throwing pre-scripted air shots at the Tories and reform smacks of desperation and lack of awareness. But after 10 long months, this is the start of the end for them, says Glenn in Leeds. And a lot of people have said that. I mean, I've been one of them who have been very critical from the beginning to say that I don't think Keir Starmer lasts the pace here, you know, because he's clearly lost the plot. He doesn't have the confidence of his own party. He doesn't even have the confidence of his own ministers. You know, there's plenty of ministers who think that he's made a mistake by not being nuanced enough on this whole trans debate, even now.
And he's alienated the left of the party as well, who don't like him at all. So there are huge fissures within the Labour Party. You may be well, and it just goes to show, you know, this is going to hang like a millstone around his neck for the foreseeable future.
It will.
He's going to be reminded about it constantly. He won't be able to escape it.
No, he won't. And this will be a quote, I think, that will go down in history and will last. And I put it down yesterday on Twitter as certainly the soundbite of the week. Check this out.
This is a question about moral courage, Mr. Speaker, about doing the right thing even when it is difficult. And the truth is, he doesn't have the balls. The Prime Minister only tells people what they want to hear. He only tells people what they want to hear. He is a weather vane who twists in the wind. He cheered an ideology that denied safe spaces to women and girls because he thought it was cool to do so. He hounded a brave female MP out of his party for telling the truth he accepts now. And now he is hiding behind the Supreme Court judgment. And isn't that because he doesn't know what he actually believes?
He doesn't actually know what he believes because he keeps changing his mind, because clearly he thinks he's doing one thing, and when it looks like it's obviously the wrong thing, he changes it.
Well, Churchill once said it's very hard for a nation to look up to a man who always has his ear to the ground. Unfortunately, I don't know I don't know who he's listening to, because the public are not on side with this at all. You know, so he's been listening to all the wrong people about all this. That's probably the first time in history at PMQs you've had someone say you haven't got the balls.
Yes.
Maybe the first time in Hansard has ever been said, actually. But she was right on. She was on the ball. Yeah. I should say about that. Completely correct.
Absolutely right. And one of the things that he started to say is that, you know, he's begun to realise that as the leader of the country, as he sees himself as Prime Minister, there are sometimes reasons why you have to bring the public with you when you make decisions. You know, when he started, it was all about we're making the tough decisions. We know they might be unpopular. He's already now giving up on that mantra because he's worked out, actually, everybody hates me and I better try and get a bit more popular, otherwise I'm out of a job.
Well, of course, that just goes to show the man has no political instinct. None. He's got no nuance of politics. None. As I've said many times, he is a lawyer. He came to politics so late in life. He is drenched in the qualities of a prosecutor. Yes. And that comes across all the time.
And isn't it interesting, though, he's in the wrong kind of lawyer, though, because, I mean, I've known loads of lawyers in the past. Many of them were very eminent scholars, very eminent speakers, very eminent, public defenders, if you like. But they were much more rounded than he is. They were much more capable of winning an argument, and he couldn't win an argument with himself.
Well, it goes to the question, what sort of Director of Public Prosecutions was he? Because if he did rise to the top of it, you would expect some flummery. You know, I forget what was the name, the old Attorney General, that big booming voice from the Tories.
Yes, I remember him.
He was great, right? He was a natural actor, and yet you see none of that quality.
That's what you normally would see. George Carman, you know, the famous QC from years back. You know, and even in the law, he appears not to be very smart because he got the law wrong over the trans debate in the first place.
Exactly.
So, I mean, you know, it's the one area.
It was the one thing you would expect him to have.
I think what he personifies is the new form of barrister and lawyer, which is these kind of lefty activist lawyers. That's where he feels at home. That's where his métier is. That's where he wants to be, as if he wants to be a human rights lawyer, which is not the same as being a decent barrister.
Yeah, exactly. And he's so beholden to his ideology, he possibly can't see the other side. That's what's happened now. Yeah. You couldn't possibly see that there might be another issue on the other side of the trans debate.
Exactly right. We've got much more to talk about. Keir Starmer absolutely toast yesterday, thanks to Kemi Badenoch. She did a great job. Rosie Duffield coming on the show a little bit later on. We've got an amazing show for you, some great guests today coming up. It's 28 minutes past 6. Rafe Harder-Manku is here. We'll talk about Ukraine coming next. Unbelievably, as we watch it get worse, you know, it's still better than where they're coming from, you know, unfortunately. But, you know, he doesn't need to reclaim the flag, you know. He doesn't, you know, of course, it might not surprise you to know that when he had his little soiree in Downing Street, the soiree for celebrating St George's Day, this was last night, there's a picture, there's some footage of him walking up the stairs in Downing Street with Mrs Starmer, who hasn't been seen for a very long time.
She's there,
They've obviously decided that we better put some form of pictorial evidence out that she's still with him, because otherwise people will start talking.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And the truth is, he doesn't have the balls.
And that is the truth. Ain't that the truth, as they say. Interesting one here, Rafe, which is not on our sort of general news list, but it's something I spotted on Guido yesterday, Guido's media report. British hacks right left-handed is the headline, and it says that there's a new survey from the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism about demography and political beliefs of British journalists, right? And it turns out back in 2015, 1 year before the Brexit referendum happened, it was something like 54% of journalists in this country self-identified with the political left. Now, they've just risen in this latest survey, which takes us up to 2023, 77% of British journalists identify as leftists. I mean, that doesn't surprise me. Probably doesn't surprise you either.
No, it's part of the long march through institutions. Why should journalism be any different to every other national institution in this country?
But it explains a lot, doesn't it?
Oh, well, we know exactly. I mean, we know why it is. Firstly, people who study journalism at university, for example, they're indoctrinated now with all of this ideology. Right. So they may go in there perfectly balanced. Yeah. They're coming out in these woke madrasas, as I call them, and indoctrinated. Secondly, I think the shock of Brexit and of Trump sent so many people into derangement syndrome that they basically just decided anything on the right was bad, and they've closeted themselves in these ideologies.
Plotting against reform because they can't understand why that is a movement as well. They literally can't understand why people are sick to death of being lied to by politicians, whether they're from the Conservative Party or the Labour Party, and they want an alternative, and it's being presented to them by Nigel Farage, who is a very charismatic and very well-qualified leader.
And, of course, what happens also is that they are stuck in their own bubbles. Yeah. Because all that they have on social media, they don't go on X now as well. They're just completely left to their own devices, hanging out with other people who are in this pure confirmation bias. And we know from the BBC, for example, that there's also subconscious bias in hiring people now. Yeah. So people at the BBC hire people who reflect their own views. They don't even know that they're doing it half the time.
And at the end of last week, you wouldn't have even known that the trans debate, because of the Supreme Court ruling, was in fact a debate, because they were still busy trying to defend, you know, trans women as women, and trying to say that, you know, this will obviously have ramifications, but they didn't approach it from the story that we're approaching it from, which is to say that, you know, this is common sense, this is absolutely the right decision that the Supreme Court has made.
And then, of course, you have things like Have I Got News For You, where you have Ian Hislop, supposedly a journalist as well, and not once was the trans issue mentioned on this, you know, dinosaur programme, and you know, it just goes to show the complete blinkered nature of people working in these
I've had more mentions on Have I Got News For You than the Supreme Court's ruling. Looking at education, the 2023 survey found this: 91% of journalists, as you say, who responded had a university degree, which is up from 86%. The percentage of those with higher degrees, such as a master's, rose to 41%. An even higher percentage of UK journalists were privately educated at both primary and secondary schools. And so, you know, you see a pattern here. Champagne socialism is alive and well in the institutes of journalism in this country.
Look, with police and with the media, we need people just to come there with no university background. You know, Fleet Street hacks, bring them back, and get chaps into, plods who can go and, tread the pavements without having to know about how many genders there are.
Well, the great joy of being in Fleet Street as a hack, which was nothing to do with which university you'd been to, was that you had no respect for anybody. You go and knock on somebody's door, whether it was the Lord High Chancellor or whether it was some, bank robber, and you would treat them exactly the same. And that's what we all were taught how to do. No longer. Let's get a voice note from Laura.
Morning, Mike. Laura here from Kent. Great show as always. I listened to even more of it this morning because I'm up earlier. I think Kemi is still missing a trick. Every time Keir doesn't answer a question, when she gets back up, she needs to answer it for him. So when she asked about will he apologise to the MP from Canterbury, she needs to turn round to Rosie when he sat down and go, well, Rosie, looks like that's a no from Keir. If she keeps doing that when he's finished a question, she will make more impact, I think. Anyway, off to listen to the rest of your show now. Bye.
Laura, brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. I think you're absolutely right. It's a style thing more than it is a substance thing. Sometimes you need to play to the camera a little bit more. And maybe as she goes through the hoops, she'll get better at it. You never know, excuse me. Morning, Mike, says Brendan from London. We might as well change the name from PMQs to PMOs, Prime Minister's obfuscation. Yesterday it was clear to see that Nigel Farage and Reform live rent-free in Keith's head. And he says, go Nige. And John in the Isle of Col says the Speaker has previous form on this when the spotlight was on Diane Abbott and she was being discussed in the chamber. 46 times she stood up and 46 times the Speaker refused to allow her to speak. And we've learned over the course of Lindsay Hoyle's sort of reign, because that's what it is, that what he says goes. There doesn't seem to be any way of questioning what he does. They're all terrified of being critical of him.
Yeah, I mean, still better than Bercow, but it doesn't take much to actually improve.
So sure.
Bercow was deliberately biased in many of the things that he did.
Right.
But there is the whiff of bias now here about because remember, he is a Labour MP.
Absolutely.
And he does seem to do things that sometimes seem to benefit the Labour Party. But
yes, indeed. A lot of front pages on Ukraine this morning. Even the Daily Mail saying that the Ukraine is the biggest story of the day. Donald Trump last night launched a scathing attack on Volodymyr Zelensky after he rejected the terms of a Ukraine peace deal. The same goes for the Telegraph. Zelensky's to blame for no peace. Zelensky's a key obstacle on the front page of the Times. I mean, I think everyone who's looked at this peace deal thinks that it's absolutely not worth the paper it's written on, because never in any way is Zelensky going to agree to it.
Well, what people don't realise, as to what Trump doesn't seem to realise, is that he doesn't have the power to recognise it. It's ceding territory is a matter for the Ukrainian constitution requires a referendum on it.
Right.
He can't agree to it. Even the parliament in Ukraine can't agree to it. It has to go to the people. It's a bit hard to have a referendum. And also, do you include the people who are now going to be excluded, apparently, in this sort of a referendum? My understanding, actually, is that the talks have been going on quite well, actually, the negotiations, and that nobody was expecting Trump to launch this missile that he just did on social media, and it hasn't helped things at all. Look, my heart goes out to the Ukrainians from the beginning. I just wish that Biden and the West had supplied Ukraine properly at the very beginning when Russia was stuck in the mire, didn't know what it was doing. We could have actually perhaps helped push the Russians out in the very early weeks of the war. We are where we are. I do think there needs to be some sort of territorial concession as part of it.
I don't see how they can do it without that, really.
It pains me to say it, but I think that's realpolitik. But the whole idea that you have to formally recognise Crimea, I don't see why you would need to recognise Crimea. That's basically giving the thumbs up to everything that Putin has done. Ceding territory that's been recently claimed, that's one thing. I don't think you need to recognise Crimea. I think it's a bit much to expect Zelensky to do that. And of course, what concessions is Russia being asked to make? That's what's not clear to anybody else.
They don't appear to be asking any concessions.
In terms of carrot and stick, it's all carrot for Putin and it's all stick for Zelensky. Right. He's getting the frozen assets, which should have got actually Russia's frozen assets, many billions of pounds, should go to Ukraine for reconstruction. That's going to go back to them, lifting the sanctions, and of course America's now benefiting from $1 billion of
reopening
minerals.
some kind of trade deal with Russia as well. But also, Trump's making the point that back in 2014, when Barack Obama was president, that's when they should have fought back on behalf of Ukraine to push the Russians out of that part of Crimea that they invaded then. And of course, nobody did anything, and that would include David Cameron.
what, 2008 in Georgia as well. There were all the warning signs were there of what was going to happen, and they're just, and that's my point. That's why my heart goes out to Ukraine, because once again, Ukraine is paying the price for Western complicity in basically just being too weak to show some strength, and that's all that dictators understand. It's strength, and if we had shown strength then, perhaps we wouldn't be in this position now.
Exactly right. Rafe Harlemagne-Crew is here. Lots of you got lots of things to say. Margaret in Birmingham says, well done, Kemi. More of the same, please. I love the way Kemi had Rosie Duffield's back, which none of her colleagues did. No, quite the reverse. They were very happy to kick her out of the party, to allow people to be vile and threatening against her, which is absolutely unforgivable. But we'll be talking to Rosie Duffield on the show later on this morning. Coming up, we're going to be talking about noisy phone users on the train. Apparently they're going to face a ban, and how eating peanuts might help you actually overcome a peanut allergy. Who could have guessed that one? This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It is 6:42. I'm Mike Graham. Rafe Harlemagne-Crew is here. Bill in Cheshire says, Starmer's competence as a lawyer, you should remember he was a human rights lawyer. Most of his opponents were government-appointed lawyers and barristers, i.e. no expense spared, but easy for them to lose without damaging their rankings, i.e. he rarely had top-quality opposition. Well, you know, nobody that I know has even spoken about the times that he was in an actual courtroom arguing a case, and maybe he wasn't very good at that either. I just don't know. Story on the front page of The Guardian. We don't normally get The Guardian on at this time of the day, but Rafe, Peter Walker, senior political correspondent, has got noisy phone users could face a ban on transport. The Liberal Democrats are redefining political battle bus, he says, by proposing a ban on people playing music and videos on their phone speaker on public transport. Now, I find that pretty annoying, but I'm not sure I want the Liberal Democrats making laws about it.
Oh, I don't know. I think I'm with them for the first time ever. You know, remember in the 1980s, people had those boom boxes on their shoulders.
Used to walk around the street.
Then the Walkman was invented, and I thought, well, that's that era over with. And it's come back in roaring fashion. I want people to be banned from using speakerphones on trains as well. And, you know, it's a combination. It's an act of dominance by a lot of these guys. Basically, they want to see whether...
A lot of women do it as well, actually.
Yeah, but it's basically, who are you to attack me? But also, you don't want some of these characters, you don't want to... You're intimidated by them as well. A lot of it is cultural. People come from different cultures where they're used to speaking loudly on speakerphones. It's extremely un-British. It destroys, you know, even on quiet carriages you get this. But, of course, how do you enforce it? Because you can just see
other problem,
the sort of altercations that could arise from these sorts of situations.
According to the piece here, apparently in February in France, a man was fined £170 by rail staff after making a phone call on a speaker in a quiet area of Nantes station. And that's the trouble, isn't it? Because you'll get these Jobsworths who will overstep the mark. You'll find yourself standing in London Bridge Station, you know, having a loud telephone conversation with somebody where they can only hear you, and somebody will come up and slap you with a fine and say you're making too much noise. That's my worry about it.
Well, but there's no excuse for playing music or videos on the phone, and everyone can carry a pair of earbuds now and stick it in.
Of
and
course.
I think it's one of the banes of most people's life. It's the little things in life that annoy people and get people down.
It is.
Stuff like people wearing backpacks on the tube. That's one of my huge... I don't mind telling them. Usually I'm bigger than them.
Right.
Take your backpack off, please.
Funnily enough, I was on a tube the other day, and it was a Northern Line tube, and I was going... Where was I going? I was going north somehow. Somebody tried to get on with a bike, and a voice from the heavens came sort of on a station platform, so they're obviously watching, saying, you cannot take a bicycle on the train. And the person had to take the bicycle off the train, and I'd never actually seen that happen before.
But how on earth did they get so far to the platform that nobody stopped them?
You would think if it's illegal,
if
you think it's illegal to take a bike on a train, how do you get through the gates where there are supposed to be, you know, staff that's telling you that you can't do it?
Well, this is the other problem, you know, and my partner notices all the time that you'll see the people jumping through the barriers.
And the staff don't do anything.
No one says, well, they'll do it if it's some sort of soy latte drinking chap coming along. Then they don't feel intimidated, so they'll stop him doing it.
But if it's 3 or 4 guys from the local, sort of scummy school, they don't want to go anywhere near them. But I mean, this week, every time I see anybody who's a staff member of the London Underground, they've got a bucket and they're collecting money for some charity. And it's like, why don't you stand by the gates and do your bleeding job, you know? But no, that's too good. There's another related one on the front page of the Telegraph about children facing a social media curfew. Again, I start to worry about this kind of nanny state all over the place, and being a parent, I'm very well aware of the dangers of all of these terrible things on the internet. But it's almost as though I'm not sure we can stop it from happening simply by saying there's a curfew, or you take the phone off people. Or I don't know how you do it.
I don't know. Maybe I'm becoming a lot more draconian. Because I just look
drugged
at
before you came in here.
I just think the damage that's been caused to our kids' brains, and it's what it is about. When I was a child, I wasn't allowed to have a television in my bedroom.
Right.
I was up till about midnight, 1 a.m. anyway. But I was reading books.
Yes.
That really developed my brain, gave me a passion for. Now, if I had a TV, I'd have been watching that till 1 in the morning.
Well, now
you've
got an Xbox or a PlayStation.
Yeah, but now kids are on their phones. God knows what they're looking at. If you can have some automatic curfew within the phone, because your child. The development of a child's brain is so crucial and important in those early stages. So I think for the security of the nation alone and the development of a next generation, I think it may be time to do something along those lines. But this could all go out the window if you just simply had under 16 telephones, which don't have these apps on them.
Peter Kyle, his digital secretary, says that he's watching very carefully a TikTok 10 p.m. curfew for under 16s, and he's also looking at tools for parents to switch off access. I mean, you could always switch off the Wi-Fi in the house, but of course most people won't want to do that because the parents are downstairs watching Netflix.
But I've said for years, all you need to do, look, it's a great business opportunity. Create phones for under 16s that have the GPS on it so parents can see where their kids are, but you can't download any of the apps that are troubling people. I think that's the way to go forward. You can make lovely kids' phones, and there's a huge marketing opportunity there too.
I mean, the other question, I suppose, is whether you take the onus of that off the parents and put it on the actual providers of the material, and you say to some of the big tech companies, you guys are making an absolute fortune, you need to be better at policing all of this, and that, I suppose, is where the crux of the matter is.
Well, I think that's what they're saying, that if they don't do it, then we'll come in. But I think essentially create kids' phones and just ensure that all children have a kids' phone.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, just having had, 4 of them, I just know they're very good at getting around all sorts of things that you don't even know they're doing. But we shall see. Coming up, we're going to talk about the hospitals that are going to defy the trans court ruling, of course, in the Supreme Court. Some new union trouble on the trains. And also, we're going to be talking about eating peanuts and how you can get past that nut allergy by simply eating them. 6:47.
Prime Minister's effectively done is ceded a lot of ground already to extremists, because he's saying, oh, they've somehow claimed the identity of England, of St George, of the flag, and we need to get it back. But this curious and extremely irritating sense about what the Prime Minister's doing, it's like somebody who's just discovered a television series that you've been watching for years and is now lecturing you on how brilliant it is.
Yes.
And you think, I know, I was there. And I think it's a very odd way of putting it. It's fairly nakedly political.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock this morning, of course. It's a bit grim out there today. I'm not quite sure what the weather is, I would describe it this week. It's been a bit sort of cold and wet and just not very nice generally. But we're nearly at May. Just another week to go and it'll be May, which will be lovely, won't it? Let's get a voice note from Jill.
Morning, Mike. Jill from Leeds, West Yorkshire. I'm just wondering now if Rosie Duffield has a clear case for unfair dismissal on the grounds of that she was right and he was wrong all along. OK, thanks. Bye.
Jill, very, very good thought. I certainly would ask Rosie that question. I mean, I don't know whether she would consider herself even willing to go back into the Labour Party. I think she has said in previous interviews that she would consider rejoining the Labour Party if Keir Starmer was no longer the leader. But she has said in the past that she believes he's got a problem with women, which he clearly does. But let's talk about, get back to that Supreme Court ruling, because hospitals have been accused of seeking to defy a Supreme Court ruling that trans women are not legally women. I said this just a couple of days ago because I think every single health trust in London, in the Greater London area, has said that they will use various exceptions to try and say that trans women can indeed be put on women's wards, that they can use the women's toilet facilities and all of that, because they've got some kind of exemption. It's not entirely clear where they say they've got that exemption from.
No, I haven't been able to make it out. They're still waiting for guidance. But there's no surprise that they're in complete meltdown, and I hope that they are feeling extremely awkward about all of this, because they're at the coalface. They are the ground zero. Remember, it was the NHS that recognised over 100 genders. Right. So they've gone from 100 genders to 2.
And they've had all the flags and everything, haven't they?
They've had everything out there. So they really are one of the most guilty culprits in this whole terrible thing. And one of the ways, the University Hospital Tees is talking about setting up unisex facilities across all their sites. Now, we know from all of the polling that the public do not want unisex facilities, these gender-neutral lavatories. They make men and women feel uncomfortable. Women don't feel safe going into these places if you're there alone in an enclosed space with some shady character or other. Also, I've not been into a woman's lavatory, but I'm told they're rather cleaner and more fresh. Women have to sit down. Most lavatory seats in male loos are not things you necessarily want to sit down on. There are whole sorts of issues related to gender-neutral toilets. Anyway, and more broadly from a male perspective, I don't want to queue up all the time. When you go to the theatre or the cinema, you just pop in and out of 1 or 2 minutes. The poor women have 10 minutes. I've been to some performances where you have to queue up for gender-neutral toilets, and it's about 10 minutes.
It's hopeless, absolutely right. But you're right. I mean, the hospitals and the NHS in general is where a lot of this stuff started. And even, I think 2 days ago, there was a report that said that under the BMA rules, there is no absolute, necessity for a doctor to tell you what their gender is. So if you're a woman, a patient who wants to have a female doctor, you can't be guaranteed that the person you think is a female is in fact a female.
And of course, that puts them into a quandary if you're dealing with, say, for example, a female Muslim woman who's being treated there, who insists on having a female doctor. What happens there? It's all top trumps of the woke Olympics.
There's all kinds of madness going on. Speaking of madness, Ed Miliband's back in the news this morning. He's poised to approve changes that would mean households in the south pay more for electricity than those in Scotland and the north. So we finally hit peak 2-tier electricity. You actually now are going to pay more for your electricity if you live in... I mean, how does this guy even still have a job of any kind? How can you charge more money to people who live in a different part of the country because they live in a different part of the country?
Yeah, I read this story. I listened to it yesterday on the radio. I couldn't really make head nor tail of it. But basically, what it amounts to is a postcode lottery.
Yeah.
And I don't think... I can't see how that's possibly going to be a...
he calls it zonal pricing. Is that not a bit like surge pricing that you're not allowed to do when you sell tickets for Oasis?
I go, the ultimate test is, are people's bills going to go down? That's the ultimate question we have to ask. If the answer's no, then it's a fail from me.
I mean, basically, I think what he's going to try and do is say that your bill will go down, but in fact, what he'll really mean is that your bill won't go up by as much. So if you live in the south, your bill is going to go higher than if you live in the north. It's absolutely mad. And you would imagine it's actually discriminatory and probably not even lawful, is it?
Well, my view is, are the wind farm owners behind it or not? Because that's often quite...
Well, it says wind farm owners, SSE and Scottish Power have claimed that the changes would create regional disparities in household bills and spook potential investors in renewable energy.
Oh, maybe it's a good thing then.
So who knows? And here's Keir Starmer. He's announced £300 million worth of funding for UK domestic offshore wind supply chains as part of a push to secure clean energy investment in the UK. I mean, they keep spending all this money. All that happens is the bills get higher.
That's the more worrying thing. They're trying. They see this as one of the issues to separate them from the Tories and the Reform. Yeah. Their support for green energy.
Right.
Read the weather of the public here. Yeah. I think the Reform Party and the Tories know where the public stand.
Well, Kemi Badenoch did say he was a weather vane yesterday, but he twists in the wind. That's the problem. What about this story about peanut allergies? This is remarkable. This is according to a Foundation Trust investigation at Guy's and St Thomas's, not far from here. The approach, now known as oral immunotherapy, has been trialled entirely in adults, and this is what they say. The study involved 21 adults aged between 18 and 40 who were given gradually increasing doses of nuts under supervision over several weeks, starting with less than 1/100th of a peanut. So I don't know how you get 1/100th of a peanut. That's pretty small. But basically they're saying if you actually eat peanuts, you might overcome your nut allergy.
Yeah, well, it's one of the reasons we have so many allergies today, though, right? I mean, you know, Professor Jonathan Haidt, in his book Coddling on the American Mind, he talks about this in terms of why do we have so many peanut allergies. It's because pregnant mothers stop eating peanuts during pregnancy, which, of course, they should be doing, then you wouldn't get so many peanut allergies. So I think there may be something to this, because you have to remember, life is terrible if you're one of these allergy sufferers.
Yeah.
Every single ingredient you have to look at when you're buying something.
And it can
be dangerous. You're always chancing with death if you order something in a restaurant that has got sesame or peanut oil in it or whatever. At least this way they can possibly have a normal life if they wean themselves into not being allergic.
Yeah, and also, you know, everybody else who gets on a plane can have peanuts again.
Yes, you can open a packet.
Apparently you're not allowed to have them on a plane in case somebody has a peanut allergy that you don't even know about. Talking of the Green Energy Brigade, quite a funny story in the Telegraph today about Evan Davis, the BBC broadcaster, who was apparently doing a podcast and has done 20 episodes of a podcast about heat pumps called Happy Heat Pumps, right? I think it's on page 10 of the Telegraph. Finally, the BBC have managed to get one of their employees to actually do something about a very biased thing that they were doing off on the side.
Well, this is the thing. This is not his BBC job. He's doing sidelines. I mean, my God, Happy Heat Pump. Who wants to listen to 20 hours or whatever of Happy Heat Pump? I mean, you just wonder what sort of content they've got there. But luckily, the BBC, I think perhaps post-Lineker, are realising that people perhaps who are getting our taxpayers' money shouldn't be supporting controversial ideas.
Right. And I mean, it, again, gives the lie, does it not, to the fact that the BBC is a neutral organisation. You know, here we have, you know, one of the senior kind of broadcasting names who's been on the Today programme, used to run Newsnight, and he's presumably got a heat pump. I'm afraid I haven't listened to his podcast. But you must assume that he's very pro-heat pumps.
Well, you're saying that Emily Maitlis and Andrew Marr were also biased?
Oh, well, and not very good. Absolutely extraordinary stuff. We've got a note a voice note from James, but we'll hold on to that and do it after the news, I think. Ray, very good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. A couple more to finish up with here. H says, Mike, there's already an app for parents to monitor their kids' phone. It's called Family Link. You can monitor which apps they install and also disconnect their phone and tablet from the internet at bedtime or whenever they're not allowed to use them. OK, well, I'd be interested to know if that works well. Tony from Barrett in Furness. Mike, with Ed Miliband saying Southerners should pay higher electricity bills, should Cumbria pay less for water as we pipe it to Manchester? Well, that's when you suddenly start asking these questions. It gets ridiculous. We'll see you after the news. Rafe, thank you very much indeed. This is Morning Glory.
You said you don't like Polish people and you don't trust them.
That's not what I said.
Yes, that's what you said.
No. You must have misheard me. I like Polish people a lot.
Christ me, I never heard of this from you. I've heard this on the radio.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. Do you want to have a listen? Have a listen to what I said, okay? Listen to this. I don't like Poles. I wasn't talking about Polish people.
Yes.
I was talking about polls. You know, when you do a poll to find out what people think. You know, like they say 55% of people vote Remain, 45% vote Leave. That's a poll. I wasn't talking about...
but later on you said you don't trust them, so you don't...
I don't trust them. No, that's true. I don't trust Poles, and I don't like Poles because I don't trust them. But that's not Polish people.
No, that's what I thought. That's what I pick up.
Oh, I'm terribly sorry. Listen, well, I would never say anything like that.
No, so in this case, I never learned English.
No, listen, it's fine. It's absolutely fine. I'm very glad you called in because I wouldn't want you walking around thinking that Mike Graham is a horrible bigot. He doesn't like Polish people.
No, I was thinking, what the hell? What's going on here, actually? I must be back and explain a few things.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And the truth is, he doesn't have the balls.
That is the truth. Kemi Badenoch speaking for the nation there, describing Sir Keir Starmer in the Prime Minister's questions yesterday. He refused to answer, of course, most of the questions that she put to him, including, were you wrong when you misinterpreted the law that said trans women are not women? Because, in fact, you used to say that they were. Of course, he didn't answer that. He wouldn't apologise to Rosie Duffield. She's coming on the show a little bit later on. We'll find out from her what she makes of Keir Starmer's performance yesterday. I suspect, judging by the look on her face in the chamber, she wasn't particularly impressed. We'll be talking more about the state of play with that ruling from the Supreme Court, because the NHS now is in the firing line. The NHS suggesting in some quarters that they will not actually adhere to the law, that they will in fact find some excuse to make it possible for trans women and trans men to be treated as they wish to be treated rather than as the law states they should be treated. And that, for me, is going to be a huge battleground coming up. We're going to be speaking to James Price, former government advisor, of course, about all of that and about how Keir Starmer could have got it so wrong and about how he still continues to get it completely wrong. Meanwhile, the other big story today is that the European Union is being pulled ever closer into the clutches of Keir Starmer. He's meeting up with Baroness von der Leyen coming up a little bit later on. Ursula von der Leyen, I should say, rather than not Baroness. We haven't given her one of those yet. Well, I mean, you never know with Starmer. She's coming to Downing Street, though, to talk about ever-increasing ties with the EU, an organisation that we voted to leave some years ago, nearly 10 years ago, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get a voice note from Belinda.
Morning, Mike. It's Belinda here. Just thought I'd made an observation about PMQs. I think you need to start some sort of tally on every week whether or not Starmer actually answers a question, because from the last few months I've been watching it, he still hasn't been able to answer one single question. He deflects. It's unbelievable. Cheers, Mike. Great show.
Thank you very much indeed. And also, when he tries to be a bit smart, he always ends up just looking smug, self-satisfied, arrogant, and rather lacking in humility. Just like most lawyers, really. 0344 499 1000. We'll talk as well about what's going on in the world of the tariff Rachel Reeves still over in America, hoping to meet up with somebody that actually wants to see her at some point over the next couple of days. She's talking about doing some kind of trade deal with the US, but she's also talking about bringing some form of youth freedom of movement in for the European Union as well. Quite what it's got to do with her, I have no idea. We'll also be talking about noisy phone users on the train and whether they should be banned. I'm a bit unsure about banning people from doing things. It doesn't seem very liberal to me, but it's the Lib Dems that want it done. Also, of course, we'll be talking about a new train problem because it turns out that the unions are not happy about not being able to shut doors and open them. And so they're thinking of going on strike. Marvellous, isn't it? It's 5 minutes past 7. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Ed Miliband's out and about this morning as well. He's got a great idea. He wants to charge you more for your electricity depending on where you live. Huh? He's on various media shows this morning, but he's not on mine, funnily enough, which is a pity, because that would be quite funny. But never mind. James Price is here, former government advisor. James, very good morning to you.
How are you? I'll do my best Ed Miliband impression if you ask nicely.
I'm not sure even you could reach the heights of stupidity to such a degree. I mean, we could kick off with that if you like. I mean, how on earth does he think this is going to work, right? You're going to charge people a different amount, a different tariff, depending on where they live. As somebody pointed out, Tony from Barrow-in-Furness, does that mean if you live in Cumbria, you get cheaper water because that's where it all is?
It's just yet another piece of extraordinary policy genius from Ed Miliband, right? The man who, as we know, doesn't know how to eat a sandwich properly, doesn't know why businesses should ever have to pay a dividend, doesn't understand how electricity is generated, doesn't understand the dynamic effects of anything. He thinks if you just change one variable, let's say take the cost of electricity in this one, that nothing else will possibly change, right? What happens then if lots of people who are otherwise productive move from the south to the north, and then they stop paying that kind of tax? Who knows what happens if it's more likely they'll move abroad, because we're seeing lots and lots of people leaving this country now, sadly. A real brain drain. The Adam Smith Institute calculated that there'll be more millionaires leaving the United Kingdom over the course of this parliament than will be leaving any other country in the world. You know, it's just one of these stupid ideas that only someone who, like Ed Miliband, has never had a real job could possibly think would work in the real world.
Yeah, I read a report over the weekend, I think, which said that the number of millionaires that have left the country already is equivalent of something like 1.5 to 2 million people not paying tax.
Yeah, that's exactly right. When you think that these people who not just pay lots of tax themselves, because the top, I think 1% of people pay about 30% all income tax. So we already have an incredibly progressive tax system. Then you have lots of people who don't pay any tax at all. But when those people leave the country, it's not just the massive amounts of income tax they pay, it's all of their investments, it's all of their initiative, it's all of their drive, it's all of their desire to build companies and invent new exciting things and have great ideas of how to make the world a better place. And they're taking it to somewhere like Dubai, which, you know, actively courts rich people, has an awful lot of energy superabundance, unlike the UK, which, thanks to net zero, has the most expensive electricity in the developed world. Or they move to America, or they move to Italy, which is not charging people kind of non-DOMS style ridiculous rates. So we're going to be left poorer and less talented as a result. And those muggins of us like you and me and everybody listening who choose to stay and try to fight for this country and make it a better place are going to be taxed even more by Labour to make up the mad shortfall.
Yes, and to give away free money to people who don't belong here, who are coming here for some free money. It's fantastic, isn't it? What a great economic business model this is.
What could go wrong?
I mean, really. Well, it's any wonder when you've got Keir Starmer in charge that this is where we've ended up, because it turns out that not only is he not a very good Prime Minister, and not only was he not a very good Speaker or indeed a barrister, he wasn't a very good lawyer, because he actually got the law wrong back in 2022 when he said that a transgender woman is a woman. It's not just my opinion, it is the law. It turned out that wasn't true. Let's see whether we can answer the question, whether he was wrong.
Mr. Speaker, does the Prime Minister now accept that when he said that it was the law that trans women were women, he was wrong?
Well, Mr. Speaker, let me be clear. I welcome the Supreme Court ruling on this issue. It brings clarity and it will give confidence to women and, of course, to service providers. The Equality and Human Rights Commission will now issue updated guidance, and it's important that that happens and that all service providers then act accordingly. This government's approach and my approach has been as follows: to support and implement the Supreme Court ruling, and we will; to continue to protect single-sex spaces based on biological sex, and we will; but also to ensure that trans people are treated with respect, and we will; and to ensure that everybody is given dignity in their everyday lives. I do think this is the time now to lower the temperature, to move forward, and to conduct this debate with the care and compassion that it deserves. And I think that should unite the whole House.
Yeah, whenever you hear somebody saying that they need to lower the temperature and they then go on a sort of rampage about how terrible the Tories are and they say they don't want it to be a political football but then become the kicker of that football, you know they're in trouble, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely right. Also, whenever a politician starts a sentence with "let me be clear," or in Starmer's case, "that may be clear," that you know that he's about to say the most obfuscatory lawyer nonsense rot, right? No, nothing of what he said made any particular sense there. And as the noted philosopher Elton John once said, sorry seems to be the hardest word.
Yes, I don't think he said the word. I'm not sure he's ever said the word sorry. I mean, I might have to do a sort of a deep dive into Keir Starmer's previous statements of any kind. I don't think I've ever heard him saying sorry, because he's so arrogant that to say sorry would be him admitting he was wrong. And as we've seen from that answer, he can't admit that he was wrong.
Well, exactly right. Look, a top tip from a former advisor here. How do you know a politician is lying? Well, their lips are moving, right? Everyone knows that.
Well, we've got Rosie Duffield coming on the show a little bit later on. Yesterday he was asked if he would apologise to her.
Will he now apologise to the member for Canterbury, the very brave member for Canterbury, for hounding her out of the Labour Party simply for telling the truth?
Mr. Speaker, I've always approached this on the basis that we should treat everyone with dignity and respect, whatever their different views, and I'll continue to do so. And I'll tell you, Mr. Speaker, for why. Because when we lose sight of that approach and make this a political football, as happened in the past, then we end up with the spectacle of a decent man, and he was a decent man, the previous Prime Minister, diminishing himself at this dispatch box by making trans jokes whilst the mother of a murdered trans teenager watched from the public gallery just up there. That will never be my approach. My approach will be to support the ruling, to protect single-sex spaces and treat everybody with dignity and respect. And I believe there's a consensus in this House and the country for that approach.
Yes, he doesn't want it to be a political football, though, obviously.
No, of course not. Perish the thought that Starmer would ever want to do this. The one thing I agree with him on there, actually, is that it's probably true that you'll never find Keir Starmer cracking a joke of any sort. For people who are watching the live feed of him there in PMQs, you've got the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, giving her sort of best stern, disapproving look. Yes. And Lorena on the other side giving what only looks like a kind of vacant expression.
I was going to say vacant is definitely the word there, isn't it? But they're not exactly... One of the things they're not doing is endorsing clearly, physically, with their sort of mannerisms. They're not clearly endorsing what he's saying.
Yeah, well, quite. And if you compare it to Rosie Duffield there, this Labour MP who I think resigned the whip, who stays on as a Member of Parliament, resigned the Labour whip because of her disgraceful treatment, all for the crime of being, I think, a working single mum who managed to win a seat off my party down in Canterbury to hold on to it in several elections, right. For the crime of knowing what a woman was before it was cool to know what it was. And they, her look of disgust. Way that she's been treated. If you read some of it, the way the Labour Party has treated her, she kept asking to meet Starmer, he kept refusing, she kept getting bullied, she had to walk around the Labour Party conference, I think, with security, because so many weirdos and freaks were screaming death threats at her and calling her a transphobe. And these are the sorts of people we should be very, very grateful for. Her and J.K. Rowling, who has torched her career in fancy Hollywood circles, have been totally vindicated, and hopefully now people will be able to go and openly enjoy Harry Potter again, because everything has to be so damn political. It's the left.
But isn't it funny? Isn't it funny how all these people suddenly go, oh, now that we've been told what it is, we can now recognise what it is, as if they couldn't tell what it was in the first place. You know, like all these companies now who are going, oh, we don't really do DIE anymore, or DEI. We don't really worry about diversity now because, you know, Donald Trump's in charge. And you go, well, why did you do it in the first place? Because you obviously didn't believe it.
No, exactly. I think, Mike, you've hit the nail on the head here, exactly, which is that Starmer needs to have a bunch of other lawyers tell him what he thinks about even such fundamental things as biology, as biological reality. This is a man who has admitted in the past he doesn't dream. He doesn't have a favourite book. He doesn't listen to music, clearly, right? I genuinely believe him when he says that he has changed his mind on the nature of basic biological reality because of what some lawyers said. And if you know, the Labour Party then goes and passes another law that says, actually, yeah, women can have willies, then he'll go and believe that as well. He is a total empty vessel who believes in nothing.
I know, absolutely right. What a great way to describe him. James Price, as ever, thank you very much indeed. Former government advisor. He's an empty vessel. That's precisely what he is. Unfortunately, people have filled him up with some real rubbish of late. Coming up, we're going to go down to College Green, I believe. We're going to be speaking to Gareth Davis, Shadow Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury. We'll find out what he makes of the latest from Keir Starmer.
It almost doesn't make any sense to me at all to talk about considering culture, because culture isn't really the issue. The principal issue here is race. It comes down to this. As I've said already, you are vastly more criminalised and brought into the criminal justice system just because of the colour of your skin. So when it comes to bail, it's absolutely true that black people are much more likely to be refused bail for the same crime with the same criminal record than white people. Why is that? Is it because individual judges or magistrates are racist?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, coming up to 20 minutes past 7. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be along then. This morning, you'll be delighted to know Ed Miliband's hosting a summit on the future of energy security. I'm hoping Jürgen will be there, the head of GB Energy, of course, Jürgen Meyer, who had a bit of a setback this week because he was told, I'm sorry, you can't use any solar panels that may or may not have been produced by slave labour in China, which pretty much rules out all solar panels made in China. Ed Miliband is out talking about stuff this morning, not to us, but of course to many others. Let's talk instead to Gareth Davis MP, Shadow Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury. Gareth, I just want to remind you, I'm sure you've been overplaying it plenty of times in your head, of what Kemi Badenoch did to Keir Starmer yesterday. Have a look at this.
This is a question about moral courage, Mr. Speaker, about doing the right thing even when it is difficult. And the truth is, he doesn't have the balls. The Prime Minister only tells people what they want to hear. He only tells people what they want to hear. He is a weather vane who twists in the wind. He cheered an ideology that denied safe spaces to women and girls because he thought it was cool to do so. He hounded a brave female MP out of his party for telling the truth he accepts now. And now he is hiding behind the Supreme Court judgment. And isn't that because he doesn't know what he actually believes?
I would say that was probably her best Prime Minister's questions performance that we've seen yet, Gareth, wouldn't you?
I thought it was devastating, the takedown of Keir Starmer yesterday, and it's quite right too. This is a man who, I'm not entirely sure what he stands for, what he believes in. He requires a court to tell him what a woman is. It's absolutely unbelievable and ridiculous. And he's hounded Rosie Duffield out of the Labour Party because of the views that he now holds. Yeah. Which I think has a lot of people scratching their heads. But, you know, this is, I hope, a change in tone from this Labour Party, from the government, although a number of their backbenchers still are outraged by this Supreme Court decision. I hope there's a turning point here for the country where, you know, those of us who are pretty clear in biology and what a woman is can say so without bravery, and can say so very clearly and categorically because it needed to be. You know, it's not appropriate or right that women feel completely insecure in bathrooms because you've got 6-foot blokes with, you know, who think they're women walking in and out. It's not appropriate, it's not right. And I'm pleased that the Prime Minister's now U-turned on this and said clearly, but he shouldn't have needed a court decision to change his mind. No, of course, and he still hasn't actually uttered the words, you know, I don't believe a trans woman is a woman. He hasn't actually physically said it yet. He keeps hiding behind this, you know, framework of the law and the clarity that the Supreme Court has given him, you know, and we haven't played the answer he gave to Kemi Badenoch there because he simply didn't answer the question in the same way that he never answers any questions. But, you know, let's talk about yet another ludicrous betrayal of the British public, and that is his meeting today with Ursula von der Leyen, where he's going to be pushing for ever more close ties with the European Union, which we voted to leave nearly 10 years ago. Yeah, we knew that he would cosy up to the European Union. If you remember, he wanted a second referendum quite consistently. And, you know, we also hear, by the way, Mike, about the possibility of a youth mobility scheme, which, you know, is basically another version of free movement, potentially. Yes. So I think it's very worrying. We know that when Labour negotiate, they do so at the detriment of the British public. Just look at the Chagos deal, giving away our sovereignty, something that we already have, and then paying $9 billion to give it away. Look at the deals they've done with the unions. Look at what's happening with Birmingham right now. This is just not going well, is it, for the government? And so if they're talking about renegotiating any of our terms with the European Union, I think we should all take that with a great degree of caution. Well, quite, because there seems to be all manner of different sort of joint actions that they're taking. 1, on food standards, 2, on defence, 3, very possibly on some kind of trade deal which would have impact on fishing and giving away more fishing rights. So, you know, and even a net zero plan, apparently. So there's lots for them to discuss, but none of it has been given to Keir Starmer as a mandate by the people, has it? No, and it's another example of how he kept very quiet, didn't have a serious plan for government. We're seeing that play out in the domestic economy, and we can talk about that. But just overall, he was very coy about what he wanted to actually do in government. Partly he didn't know, but also I think he was always very clear with himself that he wanted a closer ties with the European Union. As I was saying earlier, he's cozying up to them. And I think that will, that we have to proceed with caution with that, because that could hurt the British public. We want migration down, not up. We don't want, a return to free movement. We don't want the British public were very clear that they don't want a return to closer ties with the European Union that would hurt our domestic economy, and that's exactly what I think he's going to try and do.
Yeah, well, I mean, the domestic economy took another hit, didn't it, yesterday, when we found out that the OBR had got it massively wrong in terms of the numbers of billions of pounds that we've been borrowing. We've been borrowing, I think, 14 or 15, 16 billion more than they thought we had. And the borrowing just keeps going up and up and up. And this comes one day after the IMF said that growth is going to be down somewhere around 1.1%.
Yeah, and this is just the latest downgrade in growth forecast. We had Bank of England, yes, the OBR, and now the IMF. And the IMF were clear this week that it's because of domestic decisions, domestic factors, such as the £40 billion national insurance contribution tax rise that's hurting businesses and freezing employment prospects. And that really lays at the door of Rachel Reeves. You know, Mike, when you run a G7 economy, when you're trying to manage lots of different factors, you have to make sure that you're not exposing the economy to global headwinds. And we do have global headwinds at the moment. Rachel Reeves is right about that. But what you don't do is overextend your economy and expose us disproportionately to those factors, such as tariffs or the war in Ukraine. And that's exactly what she's done by jacking up the debt to such levels, while also burdening businesses who are the engines of growth with taxation and regulation. So it's a potent combination, but it just comes down to the fact that these people don't understand how the economy works. It's a failed ideology. Their ideology has been tried, all over the world, but it's failed every time and everywhere. And now we're seeing that play out in these forecasts.
Well, exactly right. And when you look at what some of the statements have been, and they still make them coming out of the Chancellor of the Exchequer's office, where they say, "Oh, but we had to deal with this £22 billion black hole." Well, they've borrowed far more than 22 billion since they've been in power. So all they've done is made the black hole, if it ever did exist, which there's some doubt about, they've just made it bigger.
Well, the OBR have discredited that figure. It was a nice try by Labour, but as you point out, debt has gone up, but spending has gone up by 70 billion.
Yeah.
They raised 40 billion in national insurance contribution tax rise that they promised they wouldn't do, and they're spending, 70 billion on things like the Chagos deal, 9 billion, the union bailout and deal that they did with the train drivers for 9 or 10 billion without any reform or requirement for productivity gains in return. It's just unbelievable. I mean, I haven't even talked about GB Energy. That was £8 billion for an organisation that, is another massive quango that won't produce any energy, and as we know from the chairman, it won't really produce any new jobs. So,
no.
This is money that has been misspent, and if there was a black hole, which there wasn't to the degree that they said, then why are they engaging in all this spending that they don't need to do?
Well, exactly right. I mean, we were just reading this morning. I mean, they've spent something like 300 million on offshore wind. And, as you say, GB Energy, Jürgen Meyer, the man who doesn't appear to have a job, doesn't appear to do anything. I presume he'll be at this summit on the future of energy security. But the latest madcap scheme from old madcap Ed Miliband is to start charging different prices in different parts of the country for electricity, which, by any stretch of the imagination, is bonkers.
Well, it's just another example of Ed Miliband's complete obsession with decarbonising the grid by 2030, which we don't believe is going to be possible. But as he gets to trying that, it's families who are going to be paying the price. And this is all in the context of a Labour government that is in power, partly because they made promises such as reducing energy bills by £300. We now know that energy prices are going up, and with this zonal scheme that we're hearing details of this morning, again, this is, as I say, just another example of how families, businesses are going to have to pay for Ed Miliband's green ideology.
Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. Gareth, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Gareth Davis there, Shadow Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury, talking to us from down there on College Green in Westminster. Let's get a voice note from James.
Morning, Mike. Great show as always. When it comes to kids on their phones, there is actually, Google actually do an app called Family Link. You can literally switch the phone off and just make it into a basic phone. So my daughter's 9. I've set her time so her phone will literally turn into a basic phone for like 8 o'clock. You can restrict what app she goes on, and it'll tell you the screen time. And at any point, you can just make that phone into a basic phone. And if they lose the phone, you can also make a noise. So yeah, there is an app out there what does it. I don't think a lot of people are familiar with it, but it's called Family Link on Google.
James, thank you very much indeed. Yeah, a couple of people have mentioned this Family Link. I'm certainly not aware of it. I mean, my kids are older now, so they're pretty much in charge of their own lives, so that doesn't really matter. But yeah, I mean, I know that that I took a decision in the family that basically they shouldn't have phones before they left primary school. I mean, I don't know if it's different now. I mean, this would have been, I don't know, 6 or 7, maybe 10 years ago. We always thought, if you go to secondary school, you need a phone because we need to know where you are. But when you're in primary school and you get picked up every day by your parents, at some point or another, you don't really need one. But you might say, James, at 9 is when you need a phone. I would say that's a little bit young. But, it's everybody's choice. I'm just, I'm as keen as any parent is to make it impossible for kids to access some of this stuff. I just think that that they're going to in some way, shape or form. Dave in South Gloucestershire says, Starmer's statement that his approach to the transition is supported by the majority of the people just goes to show how far Parliament has moved away from democracy and the will of the majority. Democracy is a tool used by politicians to gain power, after which any semblance of delivering the will of the people is put away in a cupboard until the next election. This has to change, and democracy needs to regain its supremacy in our politics and the way our country is governed. I think that's a great point. Starmer convincing himself that people support him is not very convincing, I'm afraid. You can't just get up and say, I believe the rest of the country would expect me to behave in this way. Well, no, actually we wouldn't. The country would like you to apologise to Rosie Duffield, but you won't do it. The country would like you to apologise for misleading everybody when you got the law wrong about trans women being women. The country would actually like you to apologise for being a completely and utterly useless Prime Minister, in addition to apologising for everything else that you've done. But of course none of those things will happen because you're deluded and you're arrogant and you lack humility and you lack even the tiniest bit of remorse for the mistakes that you've made in your career. And there have been plenty, let me tell you that. Let's have a look at Jürgen Mayer, because he, of course, is the head of GB Energy. He's a man that we often mention here on this show because nobody's quite sure what he does. He appeared at a select committee last year and said this about how you can judge him in the job.
There's two very simple answers of that, and that is, one is, how many renewable energy, clean energy projects have Great British Energy been a part of, either as a co-investor, as an investor, or as an enabler, and thereby how much more renewable energy have we managed to get on the grid, number one, and number two is how many jobs and how much prosperity have we created as a result of that, and made sure that as much of the supply chain is Scottish/British rather than overseas.
Yeah, I think the answer to that so far is they haven't created any jobs at all. So I would say that's not a success. Sorry, Jürgen. Apart from yours, of course. We've created Jürgen's job. Well done, guys! We've got Jürgen in the job. He's the head of GB Energy. He's in charge of no one. There's nobody else there. Doesn't even have an office. Doesn't even have a website. Doesn't buy any energy. Doesn't sell any energy. Doesn't hold any energy. Doesn't have stock in any energy. Just doesn't really do much of anything. Walking around would be, using energy. I'm not even sure if he does that. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:35. Ali says this, Mike, I think you've misunderstood what Ed Millipede meant when he said he wanted those in the south to pay more for electricity. What he meant was, I want those in the south to pay more for electricity, and those in the north, and those in the east and the west as well. Well, this is the thing. I don't think he quite understands the meaning of the word increased tariff. I don't think he understands the meaning of anything, really, Ed Miliband. It's absolutely and utterly ridiculous. Let's talk now, though, to Venice Allen, who's a women's rights campaigner, of course, because the news still that we're suffering from right here is whether Labour really believes the Supreme Court verdict is right, and whether Labour really believes that actually actioning what the Supreme Court has said is going to be front and centre of their policy documents, because I'm not sure that it absolutely is. For example, what about hospitals? What about places where there's a bit of resistance? Venice, a very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. There's already signs that there are some public sector bodies, certainly including the NHS, who are going to try and kind of resist taking on board, if you like, this Supreme Court ruling. But I don't really see how legally they can do that. Can you?
No, I don't think. I think what we're seeing here is the sort of last grasp of this very delusional movement who will just literally say anything to carry on the myth that trans women are women. Yeah. And I think a lot of them are going to find it's a very expensive mistake if they truly pursue this.
Yes, because at the end of the day, a lot of it actually started in those kinds of places, didn't it? You know, a lot of the trans rights brigade started insisting on being given access to women's spaces like female-only wards and female toilets and all of that. And it's in those kinds of places where this whole sort of germinated, isn't it?
Absolutely. Stonewall went into these places and misled them on the law, basically. Yeah. And as Kemi said in the last Parliament, you know, the Stonewall law is not our law of this country. And now, thankfully, we have clarification of the actual law.
Yeah, I mean, that's the interesting thing, isn't it? And the BMA, for example, have issued a statement, I think, just the other day, saying that basically there's no necessity for a doctor to declare their gender, so that would make it impossible for a female patient to know if she was being treated by a female doctor, if that was her wish.
Well, this is the problem, you know, as you just said it, gender, you know, we've now got clarification of sex in law, which means biological sex. Well, what a surprise. But now the word that's really interesting is, what does gender mean? It doesn't mean anything, and it's in various places in law, and we need to remove it, and we need to replace it with sex.
Right. And what about places like the London Marathon? London Marathon's taking place this weekend, right? Hugh Brasher, who's the race director, confirmed that there will be those taking part in the mass event who would be entitled to self-identify as male, female or non-binary, regardless of their birth sex. I don't know what the law would say about that. I don't know how that happens. I mean, is that not a breach of the law as well?
Well, it seems like it, doesn't it? And I would imagine that there'll be some kind of legal implications of that. However, saying that, I think we do need to give institutions a little bit of time to catch up.
Yeah.
I mean, this has just happened just before Easter, and suddenly we're now saying, you know, what's your policy? And that's absolutely right for us to say that. But we also do need to give these people time to write a new policy. However, I think this announcement from the marathon is really, you know, not reading the room at all.
No.
And it's put so many female athletes, so many female runners, you know, at a disadvantage. It's just not fair.
Well, this is the thing. And I mean, those people who have campaigned for equality, for proper equality in this, would say, well, OK, if you want people to be able to self-identify in a race, that's fine. Well, then they'll have to be racing under their own sort of category and their own banner. So, for example, if you're identifying as a female, despite being a male, you can't run as a female and be counted as a female and be given a time in a female race as a female.
Absolutely. I think this whole question of sport is actually really interesting, and one thing that doesn't really get said enough is that their whole argument is by taking these hormones, they are sort of disabled to the point that they're the same strength as women.
Yeah.
I think that's a really bad advertisement for gender treatments and surgeries and hormones.
Yeah.
Just anyway, it's like, okay, so you're basically saying that this is disabling and hurting these men. I just think it's awful.
Yeah, right. And similarly, it wouldn't even need to be people taking hormones, would it? Because according to Chris Brasher, or Hugh Brasher rather, who's also apparently decided not to go on X anymore because it's too horrible and it's like a gutter, so you kind of know where he's coming from. He's basically saying anybody who identifies as a woman, so you don't have to be taking hormones, you don't have to have had any surgery, you just need to say that you woke up this morning, you feel like a woman, like Shania Twain.
The only thing I'd say about that, Mike, is obviously I feel awful for the female athletes right now in this moment, the marathon runners. However, when these men win, it really does show everyone what this is all about. So, you know, in the same way that they try and shut us up, we say, no, speak, because what you're saying is so mad, we want everyone to hear it. It's like, okay, compete, win, take those medals, let's see how the public like that.
Yeah, exactly right. And I was listening to a debate about Park Run, because Park Run I think took place, I think it was last weekend, a similar kind of argument being made.
Every week, isn't it?
Oh, is it? Oh, I don't know. I don't do a lot of running. Sorry, I'm not up to speed on that. No, I mean, apparently they were saying that the organisers of Park Run saying, oh, but it's not really a race, it's just a bit of fun. People turn out in a park and they run around and, you know, everybody has a good time and nobody really cares what gender you are or what sex you identify as. And of course, it turns out that people actually look at a time list at the end of the race. They see whether or not they came above somebody else. They like to know what their time was. Was it better than last year? You know, it's a race. You can't pretend. But this is the
juniors. Yeah. And it's like, if it's just a fun run, it doesn't matter. Why are you taking these sats? Why are you, why aren't you just running?
But this is the thing. This is what's punctuated this entire movement, it seems to me, a kind of denial of reality. You know, you're trying to convince me that you're a woman. You're trying to convince me you're not running in a race. You're trying to convince me that you don't care about the time. And you're trying to convince me you don't care about which category you're in. And yet you want to be in the women's section.
I mean, it's completely mad. You know, they say if trans women are women, you know, trans truth is a lie.
Yeah. And Keir Starmer...
Everything is the opposite.
Yeah, exactly. And Keir Starmer can't be a lawyer because he didn't understand the law.
He's a trans lawyer.
Very good. I like that. I think that's probably the quote of the day so far. Keir Starmer's a trans lawyer. Brilliant. Venice Allen, thank you very much indeed. Women's rights campaigner. We might have to keep that. We'll write it down. Andrew has got a voice note for us.
Morning, Mike. Andrew from murky, cloudy Oxfordshire. On James Price's analysis of Keir Starmer being an empty vessel, I think the best description of him is the 1970s or 80s cartoon character, Mr. Ben, where he would put on a different hat or a different suit, depending on who he thought he'd best represent or best be that day. The man's nothing but an absolute fraud, and everyone can see what he is. Cheers, buddy. Ladies.
Andrew, thank you very much indeed. Yeah, I think you speak for an awful lot of people. He is an absolute fraud, and that's entirely how he comes across. Melissa says, I live in Aberdeen and saw an advert for an executive assistant for GB Energy recently, so there might be more than one employee soon, says Melissa in Aberdeen. Well, I've actually just been handed the latest papers on GB Energy, because apparently they've managed to start up an actual website. So it's wrong to say... you know, unlike Keir Starmer, I will admit that I was wrong to say they don't have a website, because now they have one. And it says that Jürgen Meyer is the start-up chair. He's got letters after his name, CBE, FRS, FRENG. I presume that's something to do with engineering. I could put a few other letters in there if you like. It starts with TW. No. Francis O'Grady is the start-up non-executive director. Isn't that woman that runs a union? Oh, well, we know where we're going here then. That's the board. Frank Mitchell. Wasn't he in EastEnders? Start-up non-executive director. Kate Gill-Martin, start-up non-executive director. She also served on the Resolution Foundation's Commission on Living Standards. Oh, yeah, here we go. Yeah, we know about that. Dr. Nina Skorupska, start-up non-executive director. Valerie Todd. And where do all these people work? They haven't got an office. Where are they all going? Our executive committee, here we go, this is good. Our executive committee will set our direction as a company, allocate resources and track performance. Brilliant. Fantastic. Well done, Jürgen. Super. Yes. Well, I mean, Jürgen might be at this summit. You never know. Ed Miliband's hosting it. The future of energy security. We'll be able to track it live this very morning. We'll come back to you when they do anything interesting, which might be never. Coming next, Liam Halligan will get his take on what's going on.
absolutely petrified, and I'm not surprised, because you see some of the people who are out this weekend waving banners saying they want to bring back witch burning or they want to hang you, and even people who are supposedly reasonable, and I use that word very loosely, cannot bring themselves to condemn these people, and the ones who are on their side will never ever say it was wrong.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:48. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock. Gary says this from Portree. He says, I'm totally against net zero, but as they're planning to ruin the landscape of the Isle of Skye by putting in hundreds of wind turbines and massive camps to house the workers, then we should be getting free electricity. Well, funny you should say that, Gary, because Ed Miliband's got an idea, right? He came up with this one last year.
This is such an exciting development because it's saying to people who are buying a home that it will be guaranteed that you will have zero bills for at least 5 years, and that's a combination of heat pump technology, solar panels, battery technology. And it's so exciting because with Great British Energy, our new publicly owned energy company, if Labour comes into office, we'll be seeing more of these homes coming into being. And what also it's all about is tackling the cost of living crisis, and that's what Great British Energy, with our biggest investment in homegrown clean energy in our history, is all about doing.
How's he going to make it free? Huh? How's that going to work exactly? Does he understand economics? I'll tell you, let's talk to a man who does understand economics, Liam Halligan, economist and broadcaster. Liam, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. Good to be with you.
Nice to see you. I need you on here to counter the madness of Miliband. I mean, he's doing the rounds this morning, talking to people, talking absolute cobblers. He's apparently not coming on our show for some reason, but he's been saying things like a 76% tax on energy companies isn't going to make them necessarily put the prices up. There he is talking about providing houses with literally no bills at all, even though you've got a heat pump and you've got solar panels. I mean, I don't know how he's managing to conjure all of this incredible free money out of nowhere.
I think the debate on net zero is shifting really, really quickly, Mike. The so-called Overton window of what polite society allows you to say about it has been transformed just in the last 6 to 8 weeks, I'd say. Trade unions are now being a lot more vociferous about the extent to which net zero is destroying our energy complex, making energy prices very expensive. We're seeing major pieces of industrial infrastructure fall by the wayside, not least our blast furnaces. And I think at the same time, you're getting a sense that the Tories now are saying that net zero 2050, those targets are simply impossible, even though they were set by the Tories. So I think the debate is changing here, and you have to wonder how long Ed Miliband can actually last in the Labour movement, because its net zero policies are seriously annoying, not just trade unionists, given their impact on industrial Britain. They're also annoying voters across the red wall. And I think we're going to see quite a lot of pushback on net zero in these local council elections as more and more red wall voters abandon the Labour Party on this issue.
Well, because it is literally pie in the sky, and the closer that it gets to kind of, any kind of definitive policy, the further away it seems from reality.
I think that's true, and Ed Miliband has for many years had this mantra that renewable energy is cheap energy. Well, this country's lowered its carbon emissions by a higher percentage than any other major economy in the world in the last 25 to 30 years. We have a very high share of renewables in our electricity mix, 40 to 50% on some days, and yet we have the most expensive electricity for firms and households across the developed world. Rachel Reeves has consistently said there is no trade-off between growth and net zero. there damn well is when you're trying to keep British manufacturing going. So I think the rubber is now hitting the road when it comes to net zero. This is really been, Labour's had this big split across its politics for many years, more sort of well-heeled, trendy, urban voters who like net zero because it doesn't really impact them and it's a way for them to virtue signal, and much more traditional red wall voters who really don't like it. I mean, I think Nigel Farage had it right when he said net zero is the new Brexit. I think at some stage, unless the political and media class really winds its neck in here, I think at some stage the likes of Reform are going to start calling for a referendum on net zero, unless we have a major change in our policy.
Yes, I think that's right, because more and more, as you watch the Labour government kind of self-destruct, because that seems to be what they've been doing for the last 9 to 10 months, the economy's in the worst state that it's ever been in. It doesn't show any signs of improving. The IMF has just downgraded Britain and said you can't blame Donald Trump. I could go on. We'll come back to the economics of it. But yesterday, I thought when Keir Starmer said, I think the rest of the country would expect me to behave in this way effectively, which meant that he wasn't going to apologise to Rosie Duffield over the trans business. I think they're deluding themselves that they've got a lot of support because they only talk to their own supporters.
I think that's true. We all remember, don't we, that Labour got 33% of the vote on a 60% turnout, which means they got 20% of the vote. So 4 out in 5 of the electorate didn't actually vote for this Labour government, even though they've got a big majority. So their support is wide, but very, very shallow and really quite brittle. And I think we are going to see some sense of that lack of well-grounded support. This feels very different to Blair in 97, Mike. You and I were around at that time. Back in 97, you had a lot of the public that were willing for quite a long time to give Blair the benefit of the doubt. And of course, his 170-odd seat majority was built on a much, much higher share of the vote. It was 43% of a much higher turnout. And also, I think his front bench was a lot less ideological than Starmer's front bench. On Starmer's front bench, you've got no one who has any business experience at all. Pretty much all of them have only ever worked in the public sector or the sort of part of the private sector that works constantly with the public sector. And I think there's a sense that they don't really know what they're doing on the economy. You now have a situation where the British government, figures came out yesterday, borrowed £20 billion more in the last fiscal year than it did the year before. We borrowed £17 billion in March alone. That's a huge amount of money. If you put a penny on income tax, Mike, for a whole year, that raises £7 billion.
Wow.
So if you put 2p on income tax, that's 14 billion. Well, we borrowed more in a single month in March than you would raise for a whole year of tuppence on income tax. These are enormous amounts of money that we're borrowing. And I do think there's a sense that Rachel Reeves hasn't got the grit to rein in the scale and size of a now bloated state. The big pay awards she gave to the public sector immediately, pretty much on coming into office, are now taking their toll on the national accounts. And I don't like to cause alarm here, but a lot of the money the government is borrowing each month is actually spending on interest on our existing debt. So I do feel we have to get hold of our public finances, and yet politicians still don't really want to talk about it. They think they can keep borrowing and spending till the cows come home. And they can't. In the end, financial markets will say, no, we're not going to lend you any more money unless we charge you much, much, much more.
And then they never get
across the economy.
Right, and then they never get out of that spiral of debt, do they? And that is what I was referring to this yesterday. We were talking about it on the show when the figures came out. That if you're borrowing money to pay off interest in no domestic scenario in your own home, would that end well? Would it? I mean, there's just no way.
The only way you can get out of a situation like that, Mike, is massive inflation. In which case, the value of the debt is inflated away. But of course, that's enormously painful when you get stagnation, all kinds of political aggro when you get really high inflation. The only other way you can get yourself out of a fiscal hole is to grow your way out of that hole. But Labour seem to be in some kind of political and intellectual and ideological doom loop. They see the public finances going wrong and they think, oh no, there's a black hole in the public finances. We need to raise tax rates in order to get in more tax revenue. But we're seeing that doesn't work. When you raise corporation tax, as we have, you get very little extra revenue, and in many cases you get less. When you try and put VAT on private education, it's not as if you raise lots of money. It just means that lots of parents can't afford private education.
Exactly.
So you lose.
And also, they're not actually, all of the public sector cuts that they're promising to make haven't really been made yet. They say they're coming, but they're not seeing a benefit from that. And generally speaking, it's impossible to cut public spending much because things happen, like the Ukraine war.
Well, it's not that we don't really have cuts in public spending, Mike. The welfare savings that we're hearing so much about, $5 billion a year by 2027, 2028, for all that political pain. It doesn't mean we're going to be spending, welfare spending is going to go down by $5 billion from where it is. It means it's going to go up by, $25 billion over the next 3 or 4 years rather than by $30 billion.
Right.
So it's slowdowns in the still fast rate of increase in public spending. And that's where we are. And we seem to have both a political and media class these days that doesn't understand that in the end, if you're managing a country, you've got to make the numbers add up at some point. And we seem averse to wanting to make the numbers add up.
Yeah.
Of course, it's difficult, but the alternative is that you end up with a major, major systemic crisis that causes even more pain and just increases the sort of general cynicism of the electorate now towards the people who are supposed to be in charge.
Yeah, and that's exactly, I think, where we are. Very well put. Liam, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Liam Halligan, economist and broadcaster there with the truth. The whole truth and nothing but the truth, which is what you get here. Not the sort of lefty, watered-down nonsense you get everywhere else, where people tell you, oh, but don't worry, there's jam tomorrow. There's things coming through down the pipeline. It's all going to be great. Well, it isn't all going to be great. Let's get Steve on Starmer.
Morning, Mike. This is Steve in Hearts. I don't think we should be calling Keir Starmer an empty vessel. I think we should be calling him by his genuine name, Rodney, and have a bit of fun about who makes up the rest of the cast. I mean, what have you got? Del Boy Rayner. I mean, the Spiv, what's his name? Boise, that's got to be Jonathan Reynolds. Come on, let's have some more suggestions about who makes up the cast of Only Fools and Labour.
Surely Rachel Reeves gets a piece in there, doesn't she? Coming up, we've got loads more going on. Of course, in the next hour, we're going to be talking to Rosie Duffield. And also, Mark Littlewood's here as well. This is Morning Glory. More coming up.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us because, as you know, that's right there. That's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are
Mr.
not
President,
strong...
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And the truth is, he doesn't have the balls.
That is the truth. Ain't that the truth? Coming up to 3 minutes past 8. Welcome to Morning Glory. We have been here for 2 hours. If you've missed those first 2 hours, don't worry, because there's another 2 hours to go. But do try and be a little bit more timely if you could, please. I mean, we get up, and so should you. This is, of course, the home of common sense, and so we'll be talking about an awful lot of it coming up with Mark Littlewood, Director of Popular Conservatism UK. Also, Rosie Duffield's going to join us later on in the show, and we're going to talk to Steve Baker, too, former Conservative MP, former Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State, for exiting the European Union, because apart from anything else that's going on this morning, Keir Starmer's meeting up with Ursula von der Leyen, who's flying in, or maybe training it in, I'm not sure, from Brussels, hot-footing it to Downing Street, where they will have a conversation about ever closer ties to the European Union, because that, of course, is what Keir Starmer wants. He never wanted to leave the European Union. Don't forget, this is a guy who spent an awful lot of time trying to actually get a second referendum underway. He campaigned for it. He was the shadow Brexit secretary. He didn't, for all his worth, want to leave the European Union. And he, of course, has more in common with his fellows over there in the French capital, in the Belgian capital, in the Spanish capital, in the German capital than he has with anybody in his own capital. Yesterday, he made it very clear that he has no clue as to how the British people think. He made it very clear in his unfortunate admissions that he wouldn't say sorry to Rosie Duffield or to anybody else, despite the mistakes he'd made over the trans ruling in the Supreme Court. He made it very clear that he does not have his finger on the pulse. He does not know what the British people want. He does not know what the British people think. He doesn't really know what's best for Britain. He doesn't even know what's best for Labour, for heaven's sake. 0344 499 1000. Ed Miliband's out and about as well. He's having a summit on the future of energy security. This is a man who thinks that he can give you a house that doesn't have any bills whatsoever. He also thinks that putting prices on energy suppliers, putting taxes on them, won't affect the price of energy. The man is a complete donut, ladies and gentlemen. He shouldn't be running a whelk stand, never mind running a Department of State. 0344 499 1000. We'll talk a bit about Ukraine as well, and whether Nigel Farage could be the next Prime Minister. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Let's hear from James on Keir Starmer.
Morning, Mike. It's James from Blackburn. Why is Keir Starmer such a coward? I'm so glad Kemi finally, skewered him yesterday. He was squirming, wasn't he? And she was right. He just doesn't want to talk about it. He must have been absolutely gutted when he was on his little Easter break with Lord Ali. I mean, his wife. Yeah, he must have been really gutted when that ruling came out, because, like you say, he's such a lawman, but it's so good to have some clarity. What is he talking about? What is he talking about? I watch your show every day, and it's like just a comedy of errors all the time. GB Energy, Rachel Reeves, Angela Rayner, Lammy. I mean, Lammy, where's he anyway? Where is he? I don't even know where he is. I never really seem to see him around. I mean, I hear he's flying around. Anyway, oh, Mike, it's very stressful. It's very, very stressful. Keep up the good work.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, we're keeping an eye, as you know, on all members of the cabinet. And here's a quick look at what's going on at the summit on the future of energy security. There's 3 empty chairs there. The live feed has begun, but there's nobody there. I mean, this pretty much sums up GB Energy. Ladies and gentlemen, here they are, the directors of GB Energy. Where's Jürgen? Where is he? There's 3 chairs. Come on, guys. It's nearly 8:10. When are you starting? Get on with it. We've been here for hours. This one here from Peter in Norwich. We'll keep checking back to see if somebody sits in one of those chairs and has got any brains. I'm not holding any hope out. Quick look at GB Energy website and you see what we will do, says Peter in Norwich. Nothing there about what they actually do. What does GB Energy do? What do all these freelancers like Francis O'Grady, Frank Mitchell, Kate Gilmartin, Dr. Nina Skorupska and Valerie Todd do? We are paying for them, so I think we're entitled to know what they are doing and what they were paying for. Well, you think at least some of them could have sat in a chair, even just to get the cameras sorted out, just to get sure that they've got the, the apertures correct and all that. Let's talk to Mark Littlewood, Director of Popular Conservatism UK, who's presumably not at the summit on the future of energy security. Very good morning to you, Mark.
Morning, Mike. Great to see you.
Good to see you. We're not in a good place here really this morning, are we? We can talk about the trans debate in a minute if you wish, but let's talk about the economy, which you know a thing or two about. Rachel Reeves is over in America. According to the I newspaper, she's trying to steal investors from under Donald Trump's nose because she's trying to make out that Britain is a safe haven for global business. How do you think she's going to manage to persuade them of that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think her best hope is to argue that all things are relative, right? Because on any objective assessment, things are getting rockier and rockier for businesses in the UK. You only need to look not just at the economic numbers, which are grim enough, but numbers around business confidence and consumer confidence, which are tanking.
Yeah.
People are looking ahead to the next few months, are feeling more and more nervous and more despairing. I mean, what she should do, and what President Trump has brought into sharp relief, is remove tariffs that the UK imposes on imports.
Yeah.
I mean, you would seem to believe, if you listen to much of the mainstream media, that Donald Trump's the only man in the world to ever impose tariffs on foreign goods. We've been doing it here in the UK forever and a day, and so is the European Union.
Right.
So if we've suddenly decided that tariffs are bad, why aren't we getting rid of our own? That might be a good start for Rachel Reeves, but I don't think she's really going to go there, or at least she's not going to go there as hard and fast and decisively as I'd like.
No, and they seem to be also, I mean, to go back to the empty chair scenario down there at the Energy Summit on energy security, they seem to be trying to sell Britain as some kind of, ultra-modern, republic almost that's got this incredible kind of idea that nobody else has got, which is that we're going to be producing our own energy from the sea and the sky and the sun. And we're never going to have to use any oil, never going to have to use any gas or coal, and that'll all be a thing of the past, and we'll all have a very, very lovely time. I mean, business is not being attracted by this, because I think Miliband has admitted that despite all the money they put in to renewable energy, they haven't actually created any jobs.
Yeah, it's crazy. And the real thing to look at is energy prices, right? So if you're seeking to compete with the United States of America, and, good on us, we should compete with the United States of America, a major factor that businesses will look at, as well as our increasingly worrisome tax regime, is that energy prices in the UK are about 4 times that of the USA.
Right.
So if you're running any form of energy-intensive business, manufacturing, for example, put aside everything else. Even if we had a benign tax regime, tax breaks, corporation tax falling, income tax falling, even if we had that, anyone considering investing might very well say, well, if I build my factory in the United States of America, my energy costs are going to be a quarter of what they would be under Ed Miliband in the UK government. I mean, that is a massive deterrent to setting anything up in the UK, certainly on heavy manufacturing. I mean, the reason our steel industry is collapsing is that we've made it almost impossible to do any kind of heavy manufacturing, but almost any business.
Right.
I mean, if you just want to keep the lights on, it's going to cost you a lot more than if you were based in Austin, Texas or Miami, Florida.
Right.
So Ed Miliband needs to get on Rachel Reeves' side, if we're to take Rachel Reeves at her word, and actually have falling energy prices being the metric by which he will be judged, not increasing energy prices.
Well, they keep promising to make the energy prices fall, but somehow magically they keep going up. They just went up in April again. I dare say before the summer, the energy price cap will rise even more. And this while the oil price is falling and gas prices have been at an all-time low for a while. So how does that work?
Well, I mean, I think the bewilderment of most of the rest of planet Earth, Mike, we've actually got quite decent energy resources in the UK.
Yeah.
We could frack for shale gas. We could drill more in the North Sea. We could even go for more coal mining. So we've got reasonable resources here. But under Ed Miliband, we're refusing to go for them. Because you can only do windmills and wind and
exactly.
And
I'm sorry for breaking into a smile, but just as you were speaking there, there's a guy hoovering around the chairs at the summit on energy security. I mean, it's a pretty good summation of where we are, really, isn't it?
I'm surprised they can afford to actually switch the Hoover on with how much energy prices are zooming up.
I wonder if it's one of those cordless ones that they have to charge, or whether it's actually plugged into the wall. Let's have a quick mention of Starmer's appalling performance yesterday in Parliament. Kerry Badenoch actually looked like a leader of the opposition, which hasn't been often the case. Not often you could have said that. Let's have a quick look at what she said about Keir Starmer and how he doesn't know what he believes.
This is a question about moral courage, Mr. Speaker, about doing the right thing even when it is difficult. And the truth is, he doesn't have the balls. The Prime Minister only tells people what they want to hear. He only tells people what they want to hear. He is a weather vane who twists in the wind. He cheered an ideology that denied safe spaces to women and girls because he thought it was cool to do so. He hounded a brave female MP out of his party for telling the truth he accepts now. And now he is hiding behind the Supreme Court judgment. And isn't that because he doesn't know what he actually believes?
And we're not going to bother playing his answer because he doesn't answer the question the same way he didn't answer the question about whether he thought he was wrong on the law when he said that a transgender woman is indeed a woman, or indeed whether we'd apologise to Rosie Duffield. I mean, pretty poor from Starmer, wasn't it?
Absolutely woeful. And you can tell he's sort of lawyer-obsessed, that he's a lawyer rather than a deep-thinking politician. Because although we all need to abide by court rulings, court rulings don't tell us what to believe. Right. I mean, if you're in court pleading your innocence and you're found guilty, well, you'll have to abide by the court ruling and the punishment. But you don't have to suddenly change your mind that you were guilty after all. Yeah, right. So if Keir Starmer doesn't like this court ruling, you can say, well, obviously he will abide by it. It's the law. Yes. But I don't like it at all. He could bring forward legislation to change that court ruling. I mean, it wasn't so long ago that he thought that 0.1% of women in this country did indeed have dangly bits, and that's 35,000 people. He's now suddenly decided, because of judicial ruling, he no longer believes that. So the idea that the Prime Minister's opinions and beliefs are set by what a court rules is utterly bizarre. There's no grounds for him changing his mind. All he has to say is, I'll abide by the law, or indeed he could promise to change the law if he doesn't like the law as interpreted. So it's incredibly odd that he's just, I mean, talk about, going with the wind, whatever the courts tell him happens to be the law, suddenly becomes his belief.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, he never fails to disappoint. I mean, I was saying during the 6-day absence of Keir Starmer saying anything at all about the Supreme Court ruling, I kept saying, well, as a man who talks about the law all the time and how legal framework is what runs the country and what is most important to him is the carrying out of the law and the administration of the law and all the rest of it, I thought, how has he not come out and talked about this new ruling by the Supreme Court, which will now govern us all? But I thought he would be a bit more nuanced about it, and I thought he would say to those people who he used to support, well, obviously we'll ensure that your rights are not invaded, but I was wrong to have said that legally you are a woman, and now I'm going to retract that because the law states that you're not. Nevertheless, if you wish to live as a woman, you can if you want. He could have done it so many different ways, but he's so wooden and so hopeless that he manages to completely alienate everybody in the room.
Yeah, that's right. But again, as I say, Mike, if all of the things that he was saying prior to the Supreme Court ruling was what he genuinely believed, then he and his government could bring forward legislation to change the law. Yeah. The Supreme Court ruling isn't set in stone forevermore. That's an interpretation of their interpretation of the law as it presently stands. If Keir Starmer and most of his cabinet continue to believe, and I don't see what would have changed their mind, that trans women are indeed women. I mean, a preposterous view, in my opinion, but nevertheless, they're entitled to have their preposterous views. If he sincerely believes that, Why isn't he bringing forward legislation to change the law and out-trump the Supreme Court ruling? Why is he meekly bending over? The job of Parliament, a sovereign Parliament, is to set the law. And if you don't like the way that the law is being interpreted by the courts, if it's turned out that the law didn't quite mean what you thought it meant, you can bring forward legislation on the floor of the House of Commons to change it. Why is he not doing that?
Well, this is
why
it.
has he changed his mind?
And this is exactly why people end up going to the courts to get a ruling, as you say, on something which is not necessarily a matter of fact, but then it becomes a ruling. You know, the facts can be around the ruling, the facts can be part of the ruling, but you can have the facts be contradicted as well by the ruling, you know, because if this ruling had gone the other way and they decided that in fact a woman who is a trans woman is a woman and legally is protected with all the rights that a woman has and has all the access to the spaces, you know, I would have bet my bottom dollar that would have been challenged by somebody, because that's how it got to court in the first place.
Yeah, it could have been challenged by somebody, but Mike, we've got too much of rule by lawyers in Britain.
I agree.
These sort of rules should be set by Parliament.
Yeah.
So had the court ruled that trans women are women, I would be looking for a political party to say, well, if we get into office, we're going to change the law. It's the job of Parliament to change the law. So if you're grossly unsatisfied with the present interpretation of the law, if you need to have the Supreme Court adjudicating on a grey and unclear area, which they've now done, okay. But if you now don't like the law as it stands in any area, it's the job of our politicians to change it, not just meekly go along with the status quo. So I'm delighted with what the Supreme Court came up with. I mean, a very rare victory for common sense in the United Kingdom, but I am bewildered that it took a court to actually determine this. I mean, what else are we going to ask the court to determine? Whether the law of gravity is really true, whether the Sahara is sandy, whether water is wet. It is a pathetic indictment of the weak leadership of this government and others in other political parties, that a court has had to decide this, not the politicians we elect. Absolutely woeful.
In madness, yeah. Mark, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Mark Littlewood, Director of Popular Conservatism. If you're wondering what we're looking at there, by the way, the empty chair syndrome, it is, of course, our keeping an eye on the summit on the future of energy security. It's looking a bit bleak at the moment, to be honest, and there's nobody there. There was a bloke hoovering a minute ago, and there appears to have been a podium that's arrived, but there's still nobody in the chairs, and there's nobody at the conference, I suppose. Batman says, morning, is GB Energy boss Jürgen taking a leaf out of the Turkish barber's book? Nice short back and sides. And one here from Tina, how much are Jürgen's directors costing the taxpayers a year? That's a good one. And one here that says, if I identify as a horse, do I have to pay council tax, national insurance, income tax, etc.? If not, my name is Black Beauty from Teesside. Very good. It's 19 minutes past 8 rather, sorry. Let's talk to Onay Kassab. He's the National Lead Officer at the Unite Union. We spoke, I guess, last week, Onay, about the Birmingham bins crisis. You said to me last week, I think it was Wednesday or Thursday, we weren't going to have a meeting with the council until the following Wednesday, so hopefully there was a meeting yesterday. If so, what happened?
Morning, Mike. And yes, there was a meeting yesterday. And the first thing to say is that we are tantalisingly close, or we could be tantalisingly close to resolving this dispute. But what does need to happen is the council needs to turn up to meetings saying exactly what the leader has been saying on the airwaves. And just to be clear about that, the council leader has said that there does not need to be any pay cuts. That is not what is happening in these negotiations. Right. So if in the negotiations we can have assurances that our drivers are not going to have their pay cut, for instance, key issue, then we could be tantalisingly close as far as the rest of the issues are concerned. The original group who were hit with massive pay cuts, we could be close to resolving that. But what we can't have is the council moving to resolve one area and then throwing something else into the negotiations, specifically pay cuts for drivers.
OK. Well, let's look, so because last time we spoke, you said the last meeting they'd come to, they didn't even come with any proposals whatsoever. So it sounds like they came with something this time.
Well, they came with responses to the solutions that we've put. Unfortunately, they didn't turn up with anything concrete. I guess the one good thing is that they did ask that we go to ACAS, the arbitration service. Yeah. They've requested that, and we've said yes.
Okay.
So that will take place. We'll set dates for that, and we'll go to ACAS, and hopefully, rather than having meetings that are done in 40 minutes or an hour, we'll actually be able to set aside a couple of days where we lock the doors, get on with it, and resolve it.
Right. And so, time frame wise, no matter how tantalising it may or may not be, what are we talking about?
Well, we're looking at next week.
Okay.
We are looking at going to ACAS towards the end of next week. And again, we will turn up with solutions as we've done before. But the key here is that the council have said publicly through the leader there not need be any pay cuts. Fine. Give us those assurances at those meetings and we're done.
As far as the actual collections go, some people are telling us in Birmingham there are some collections underway. Are they from members of your union or are they from people who are not employed by the union?
The council has brought in a significant number of agency staff to help with the clear up. There are issues about whether that is within the law or not. We're dealing with that. And the council is also getting help from outside organisations.
Is it one of them the Army? Is the Army in there helping them?
The Army isn't out on the streets. They've got Army personnel. I think they've got 3 members of Army personnel helping them coordinate the operation. But the point here is it's not sustainable and it's costing the council huge amounts of extra money. It's far cheaper, far better to just get the dispute resolved. That will deal with what's going on the streets permanently. What's in place at the moment is temporary and not sustainable.
So how many, percentage-wise, if you were able to say so, of bins are getting collected? How much rubbish is being collected percentage-wise?
That I couldn't really say with any accuracy. I mean, that really needs to come from the council. I'm afraid I don't have those figures.
And I mean, in terms of what it looks like, I mean, we're seeing pictures here, which are obviously recent. They're not live pictures, so I don't know how bad it is. But what I do know is there's a piece in the papers this morning, in the Telegraph, about a risk assessment report that was given to Birmingham City Council, in which it said there would be a surge in rat-borne diseases, worsening mental health, and emergency vehicles being blocked by piles of rubbish in Birmingham under what was happening at the moment.
Yeah, and that's why we want to get it resolved. That's why we've been turning up with solutions. That's why yesterday's meeting was a tad frustrating, because we could have done so much more. But we don't think we are far off reaching an agreement if the council stick to what they're saying in public. And all those risks, absolutely. We don't want to see that happening. The best way to stop all of that is just negotiate constructively, look at the solutions we've put forward, turn up to ACAS next week. Don't just come to the table, but bring something to the table with you.
Yeah. Have you been up there this week to have a look?
Yep, I was in Birmingham. I was in Birmingham yesterday. I'm up there quite a lot, meeting with our members. And
how is it? How is it? How does it look? How does it smell?
So look, it's not something that we want, and we accept completely. It is not acceptable for the streets to be in this state. It is not good for residents. The things that people have been saying, particularly those with disabilities as well, we do not want this to go on a day longer. It's absolutely awful. There's no getting around that. But what's also absolutely awful is when you look at pay cuts for our drivers going down from £40,000 a year to £32,000 a year. Their mortgages, rents, etc. will be at risk. So that is awful as well. That needs resolving.
And how are your striking workers paying for their mortgages and rents at the moment then?
Well, we do. When people take strike action, the reality is that they do end up making a financial sacrifice. But that is in recognition of the fact that you make that sacrifice now, so you have a better future tomorrow, so you can continue paying for your rents and for your mortgages.
So you guys have been out for a while now. I mean, more than a month, isn't it?
Absolutely, yes. The all-out strike action, indefinite strike action, started on the 11th of March.
Yeah. So, I mean, they must be struggling for money.
Absolutely. Look, absolutely. But equally, they know that they're struggling for money now, but if the council gets through what it wants, then they'll be struggling permanently. So it's sacrifice now to ensure a better future.
Okay, but they're going to assume that you can't keep going like that because you'll run out of money, won't you?
Well, we will continue defending our members and supporting our members wherever and whenever they stand up to fight against cuts in their pay. I'll just emphasise that point. Yes, it is a sacrifice at the moment, but the long-term sacrifice, if you're going to lose £8 grand a year permanently, that is far, far worse.
OK. Onai, thank you very much indeed. Onai Kassab, the National Lead Officer at the Unite Union. Let's get a voice note from Damon.
Morning, Mike. Damon from Wigan. I just want to say that the way you described the board of GB Energy just now was absolutely fantastic, with the words non-start-up executive. They are 100% in the correct job, because let's face it, GB Energy is a non-starter. Cheers, Mike. Have a great day.
And there we are. The 3 empty chairs are still there. We can just call it 3 chairs. 3 chairs for GB Energy. Well done. Hip, hip. Sorry, there's nobody here. How about this from Stephen Stoke? Don't forget the trans solicitor and the trans economist as well, Mike. Calling Keir Starmer a trans lawyer, which I think is great. Leon says, Mike, great show as usual. Surely the London Marathon just says that people have to run in their biological race. It doesn't make any difference, as they are just running. Nothing needs to be physically changed. Any trans men just move further up the road and run against the women, and any trans women just move further down the road and run against the men. Well, yes, you should say that, Leon, but the thing is, people who run for a living, or people who even run semi-professional or are very keen on their timings and how they do, the people who are running in the race because they want to finish first, in terms of the women who do that, they don't want men in their category because the men are stronger and fitter and able to run faster and further. So therefore, if the men who run in the marathon want to run with other men, that's fine. But if they want to run with other women, then that surely must be unfair, mustn't it? That's the point. This is Morning Glory.
People would be rather surprised to learn that if you don't pass vetting procedures, if you're a police officer, that you wouldn't be sacked on the spot, but apparently that's not been the case. On what planet is that normal?
Well, I think there are 3 issues here. You've got to get it right. You've got to get it right for the public, who must have confidence in the police. And if they see officers who clearly have had a pretty rotten background and have been allowed to remain, that does not help the reputation of the police service across the board.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Coming up to 8:30, I'm Mike Graham. This is, of course, the home of Common Sense. It is Morning Glory. We're here with you until 10 o'clock. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be along then. GB Energy, we're very much under the spotlight this morning. We've got a voice note from Darren.
Good morning, Mike. It's Darren from Carmarthen. Hope you're well.
As you know, Mike, I've been working with Jürgen in the GB Energy office now for a while. Unfortunately, though, we do need to find a replacement for Jürgen because he now identifies Mike as a solar panel. So we do need to fill his boots. So if you know anyone, Mike, please let me know. His job is quite challenging at times. You know, he has to keep a lookout for the sun. He has to keep a lookout for the wind. So he had a phone call last week as well, Mike, from somebody, which turned out to be a cold caller from India, Mike. But, you know, so he's answering phones, making tea, keeping a lookout for the wind. So if you know anyone who fits the bill, Mike, let me know. Have a good day.
Darren, as ever, brilliant. We'll do our best to see if we can find a replacement for Jürgen, who now currently is identified as a solar panel. Very good. Maybe somebody from China, or maybe one of the migrants that have been coming over today. We could just slap them on a bus up to Aberdeen and say, how'd you like to lead GB Energy? What a great idea. Ross Clark is here. Normally we'd be speaking to you about GB Energy, Ross, but this morning we've got a piece in the Sun about the European Union. Ursula von der Leyen is coming to visit Keir Starmer so they can have a lovely little cosy fireside chat about closer links with the European Union and Britain. Very good morning.
Good morning, Mike. Hi.
So, Keir Starmer and the blockheads, it says, rather nice headline. I don't think anybody's asked for this, was my first question, I suppose. I mean, why is Keir Starmer so keen to get back into bed with the European Union?
Well, this is all about what Keir Starmer calls his reset in relations between Britain and the EU. And, I mean, there are some good reasons why you might want to renegotiate aspects of the trade deal and withdrawal deal from Europe, from the EU. Partly because the EU, when it granted us a free trade deal, zero tariffs, but we remain subject to some of these what are called non-tariff barriers, which are basically regulations which are designed more to thwart trade rather than to sort of health and safety devices. But of course, the EU is trying to use the opportunity to draw Britain back into its regulatory audit. And one of the things which it is trying to impose upon us is this free movement for 18 to 30-year-olds. Now, we have, as you know, we have very high net migration as it is. You add on free movement to 18, 30-year-olds, well, that's only going to increase, which is why the Rishi Sunak government a year ago rejected the case for a free movement for 18 to 30-year-olds. But EU is trying to, trying to plug it anyway, and seems to have found a pair of willing ears in the shape of Rachel Reeves.
Yeah.
She seems very interested in the idea. Yvette Cooper, Home Secretary, rather less so.
Yes.
But it seems that it will be part of discussions between the UK and the EU this week.
It does seem to be the case. Let me just bring Steve Baker in, former Conservative MP and former Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for exiting the European Union, of course. Steve, very good morning to you. Welcome.
Good morning, Mike.
It strikes me that none of this stuff that Starmer is about to discuss with Ursula von der Leyen has been in any way mandated by the electorate or by the people who voted certainly to leave the European Union. What do you make of it all?
Well, certainly Labour are going to sell out our vote to leave the European Union and our independence. I have to say, though, we've already got a youth mobility scheme with 12 countries. Nobody's much bothered about it. And the sellout won't come through youth mobility, which is capped and time limited. The sellout will come, as Ross just said moments ago, from aligning us to EU product and food regulations.
Yeah.
That will make an EU free trade deal impossible. Those are exactly the kind of non-tariff barriers which President Trump is trying to eliminate. It'd be a disaster because it will condemn this country to decline when what we need is growth to avoid going bankrupt. And so, your listeners will know that this country has got a real problem with meeting pension and healthcare obligations. Honestly, Mike, this morning I feel like I'm living through a magic trick. Labour have successfully got us talking about youth mobility when the truth is the real sellout is going on where we're not looking, and that is aligning to EU law.
Interesting. And Ross, very strange timing of this. I think you and I have talked about this before, that in the midst of Donald Trump's tariff, regulations being sort of, discussed and changed and sort of, ameliorated in one way or another, why is Starmer so keen to do this now?
Well, he's been trying to do this for a few months, to be fair, before Trump's tariffs announcement. But of course, the EU is very keen to seize advantage at the moment, because his biggest fear is that Britain ends up a sort of different economic model, a more liberal, more business-friendly, a Singapore-on-Thames, more 20 miles off Calais. That's their biggest fear. And the EU wants to trap us in all kinds of, regulations and trade arrangements to prevent that happening. And of course, the EU's been rather stung when Trump did announce his tariffs, that the EU was going to be subject to 20% tariffs and Britain was going to be subject to 10% tariffs, and with a promise of possible trade deal as well. So, there was a tangible benefit from Brexit, which, of course, is the last thing the EU wants, because it wants to draw us back into its orbit.
No, exactly right. Ross, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. We'll see you again very soon, I'm sure. Let's go back to Steve Baker. Steve, I mean, the other thing, I suppose, that is a problem for the government and for Rachel Reeves, or maybe it's not so much for them as it was for you guys, is the state of the Treasury, the state of the civil service, the state of the officials around all of this, who clearly are very much more pro-EU than certainly any of the ministers were in your government.
Well, that's certainly true, yes. But let's face up to what's really happening here. The consensus that's existed post-war of heavy regulation and being in a big bloc called the EU, a protectionist bloc, this consensus is breaking down. You can see it in the government's borrowing figures. Rachel Reeves has put up taxes and borrowing has gone up. Now, the idea that she could further put up taxes is really for the birds. Taxes are already basically at their practical limit, and it's just not working. And this country needs to take a different course, and that is a course which results in growth. We won't get that growth by aligning to EU law and raising taxes. It's completely mad, but it is the sort of thing one would expect from the Labour Party.
Because we've also seen in recent days the betrayal of the fishermen once again. We spoke to a fisherman yesterday who said that all of the gains that had been made in recent years are likely to be wiped out because Starmer wants to give away more fishing rights to France in order to help get some kind of defence deal with the European Union.
Well, this is it's absolutely baffling that they're doing this. Cooperation with the UK on defence and security is a prize for the European Union. It's one of our advantages that we can offer it. We shouldn't be giving up fishing in order that they can take advantage of cooperating with us on defence and security. I mean, it's totally incompetent negotiation. And it is a sign that under this government, the sort of disposition of the whole system is to take us back into the European Union insofar as they can. And I'm afraid this is really, it's not just a betrayal of Brexit, it's a betrayal of the whole nation and our best prospects. And the truth is that... Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, what practically can we do about it, if anything?
Well, this is the problem with a government that's got what amounts to a supermajority, and I'm afraid, I'm sorry, but I and others did warn this sort of thing would happen. In Wickham, people who usually vote Conservative stayed at home in their thousands, and I lost, even though the Labour vote fell. I mean, this election was a terrible, really, indictment on the political class, a huge sort of sigh of disillusionment with politics, but the result is that the Labour Party's got an absolutely enormous majority and can do what it wants. And I have to say, reading the Guardian story about this free movement, youth mobility proposal, I can just see all the elements for setup. The government has put up these MPs to write to them, I'm quite sure, asking for this scheme, and they have successfully got us talking about youth mobility, when on the other hand they're selling out the fishermen, they're really giving up defence when they should have done something sensible. There's no talk about financial services, which again is a big opportunity for the EU to do more trade with us on financial services. So what is actually the routine 5-year review of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement? This was always going to happen this year. It's turning into yet another illustration of the incompetence of this Prime Minister when it comes to negotiating in the national interest.
Yes, and Rachel Reeves over in America, of course, is attempting to tell American investors that Britain is a safe haven in a very sort of dangerous world and a sort of shining example of a place to put your money. I'm not sure even I'm convinced by that, never mind over in America whether they will be.
Well, the United Kingdom is a safe haven in the sense of the rule of law. You know, investors' property is safe here in that sense, in a way that's perhaps it's not elsewhere. But the taxes are the issue. I mean, what we need to do is make the UK the best place in the world to invest capital for a return. That will result in productivity rising and everybody being better off. And that means cutting taxes on capital. It means cutting taxes on employment. If we want more better jobs, that's what we have to do. And of course, the problem is she's got high taxes on capital and employment. And American investors are not fools. They can see it. And no amount of pleading safe haven and rule of law will make up for taxes being too high.
No, exactly right. Steve, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Steve Baker, former Conservative MP, former Secretary of State for exiting the European Union. Yeah, remember that? We exited the European Union. We voted to do it in 2016. Boris Johnson vowed to get it done in 2019. He got elected with a massive majority. It happened in 2020. But here we are, Keir Starmer trying to drag us back, not really kicking and screaming because nobody's really making a fuss about it right now. But I think you will as time goes on, because you'll realise, actually, hang on, this is not what we voted for. This is not what we asked for. This is not in any way what we expected. But, of course, we should have expected it. Let's get a voice note from Phil.
Good morning, Mike. Phil from Nottingham. Now, when the Radio Awards come up next time round, I don't know what category they're going to put you in. I mean, are you going to be Best Current Affairs Show? Are you going to be Best Breakfast Show? Or are you going to be Best Comedy Show? Because, to be honest, the way this government performing, I think you could win the Comedy Award, and I think you could get up on stage and thank the Labour government for everything they've done for you.
That's a very good thought, Phil. I mean, unfortunately for me, I've never won any awards. I've never really wanted to, and I think people just don't want to give me any. I'm not sure I would accept one, to be honest. I prefer to be on the outside of these events and looking in. I'm not really... I know the show's great. It's brilliant. It gets better every day. It's largely thanks to the people who work behind the scenes and largely thanks to people who contribute to it like you. That's what makes it great. And we'll just keep getting better. How about this from Frank in Bromley? Mike, it's clear that no matter what question that Starmer is asked, he just replies by reading from a script. So he clearly can't think. You know, we used to say that about him when he used to do Prime Minister's questions from the other side as the leader of the opposition. He could never sort of pivot. If something broke late, if there was a news story that happened at 10 to 12, he could never ask a question about it because he wasn't prepared. And he's not a man that thinks on his feet. He's meant to be a barrister. I don't get it. As Steve says, morning, Mike, the bleeding sycophant Cooper nodding away like a Churchill dog makes my blood boil when Keir Starmer is peddling his lies. You mentioned it just as I was furiously typing this. And Mark says, Rosie Duffield's face says everything about how this country sees two-tier Keir Steeler. Great show. Well, we'll be talking to Rosie Duffield coming up in the next hour because she's got, I'm sure, plenty to say about Keir Starmer. She wrote a piece in the Mail yesterday saying, I don't really expect him to apologise, and he probably will not. But nevertheless, I think she'll have some very interesting thoughts on the way Labour is now trying to present itself as the place and the party that always wanted to protect single-sex spaces for women. Pull the other one. It's 8:44.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 8:46. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. We'll be talking to Cormac Smith very shortly about what's going on in Ukraine. Alan in Merseyside says, "Go home, von der Leyen. You're not welcome here. We are not in the EU." Well, I mean, you could say that, but obviously she's been invited by the Prime Minister. We'll go to the phones in a minute. Just want to mention, though, one story that we haven't got to yet. Front page of The Sun. Freddie Flintoff on that terrible crash that almost ended his life back in 2022. He was dragged nose down for 50 metres after crashing and flipping the car he was in Surrey. He says, "I was frightened to death." There's a new Disney Plus show out in which he basically claims the BBC's wish for daring stunts means he was treated like a piece of meat. In the front page there saying, "I thought my face had come off and I feared I was dead. I was just thinking, is that it?" It's an incredible story, really, really sad for Freddie Flintoff, but so sort of rewarding, I suppose, for him that he's been able to get back with his family and been able to get back with his life and patching it all back together, because he was quite a character and still is, Freddie Flintoff. Let's get a voice note from Perry.
Morning, Mike. Now, this isn't just hearsay. We have television interviews, we have radio interviews where Keir Starmer has blatantly lied to the public. He lied to the WASPy women, said they would get everything they deserved if they got into power. He promised to look after the pensioners. He promised to look after the farmers. He lied to us about the transgender law. The man has compulsive lying disorder. He should be struck off the register of being a barrister. How could this man ever stand in front of a jury again and convince them that he's telling the truth? The man is a disgrace.
I can't disagree with any of that, Perry. Let's talk to David in Gloucestershire, who wants to say what he thinks of Labour. David, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. How are we?
Very well, sir. What can I do for you?
Well, I did have this thought about when you were saying about the NHS still fighting over the trans debate, and despite the law and blah blah blah. Well, of course they're going to keep fighting it because their very jobs rely on it. So once you stop the trans debate, as we have, or hopefully we have, their whole meaning of being is completely collapsed and they will lose their jobs.
Yes.
And some of them are on very, very high. We've seen these ridiculous jobs on 70, 80 grand.
Yeah.
Well, where are they going to go? Most of these people, they've got nowhere else to go. They wouldn't have a job in anything else.
Right. Well, this is the thing. This is where it all started. It started in the public sector, and it kind of fed into the private sector, and they all got to be as bad as each other. But the private sector has woken up a little bit, of course, since Donald Trump got in, and it's now slightly better there. But the NHS, you're right, is riddled with people.
Yeah. Well, it's just absolutely ridiculous, know. And, I mean, Kimmy yesterday, the way she skewered Starmer, I watched it live. I thought it was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
And I said to my wife, she's got to do more of this, because if she does more of this, or more of that rather, I think Nigel will actually struggle a bit, and that's the way she's got to do it. If the Conservatives have got any chance of coming back whatsoever.
I agree, absolutely right. But he leaves the door open for her to do it. David, thanks very much indeed. She's got to do more and keep it up and keep the pressure up on Starmer, and I think he'll crumble. Coming up, Cormac Smith is here. We're going to talk about what Donald Trump's been saying about Volodymyr Zelensky.
But really, when you look at it, it seemed absolutely absurd that we were even there to talk about it.
100%.
I have to say as well that the judgment and the ruling, people that know these kind of things say this is actually the most straightforward and easy to understand ruling for absolutely decades from the Supreme Court. So a lot of the people now who are making excuses, and I'll include Keir Starmer in that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 8:53. I'm Mike Graham. The time is of the essence, of course. We'll keep checking back on GB Energy and those 3 empty chairs there at the Energy Summit. There's a few more people knocking around now. The hoovering seems to have ended, but there's still not much business being conducted. If this is the sign of the new glorious kind of, white-hot heat of the technological revolution, as Harold Wilson used to say in the 1960s, there's not much going on. We're going to talk to Cormac Smith in a moment, former Ukrainian foreign minister advisor. Let's have a quick look at J.D. Vance, though, and what he had to say, the Vice President, on Ukraine and Russian peace.
We've issued a very explicit proposal to both the Russians and the Ukrainians, and it's time for them to either say yes or for the United States to walk away from this process. We've engaged in an extraordinary amount of diplomacy, of on-the-ground work. We've really tried to understand things from the perspective of both the Ukrainians and the Russians. What do Ukrainians care the most about? What do the Russians care the most about? And I think that we've put together a very fair proposal. We're going to see if the Europeans, the Russians, and the Ukrainians are ultimately able to get this thing over the finish line. Again, I feel pretty optimistic about it. I think everybody has been negotiating in good faith, but it's now time, I think, to take, if not the final step, one of the final steps, which is at a broad level, the parties saying, we're going to stop the killing, we're going to freeze the territorial lines at some level close to where they are today, and we're going to actually put in place the kind of long-term diplomatic settlement that hopefully will lead to long-term peace.
That's J.D. Vance talking. A very different message, it would seem, from the one that Donald Trump put out on his social media sort of late yesterday afternoon, early evening. Cormac Smith here, former Ukrainian Foreign Minister advisor. Cormac, very good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Mike.
That does sound a bit different, doesn't it, to what Trump said yesterday, because I saw that your response to Trump's tweet was fairly incredulous. What's the real situation, do you think?
To be honest, Mike, I don't think it is that different. I mean, I would describe Vice President Vance's statement just there is similar ways to how I described Donald Trump's statement. I think it's despicable, and I think it's separated from reality. This proposed peace settlement has absolutely nothing in it for Ukraine and no concessions for Ukraine, and it virtually has everything that Vladimir Putin would want. The issue, I think, around Crimea, people do not understand how absolutely existential Crimea is for Ukraine. Vladimir Zelensky said last year, this war began with Crimea and it will end with Crimea. But further than that, from a strategic point of view, as long as Russia holds the Crimean Peninsula, Ukraine will never be safe or secure. Such is the control that it gives over the vital Black Sea ports and its location to the rest of Crimea. It's like a dagger into Ukraine's underbelly.
And I mean, Trump's point is that why was it not defended better in 2014? I mean, I guess there are two ways of looking at that, aren't there? You could say, well, that was then and this is now. You might as well ask many questions. But I mean, it's a question worth answering, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I mean, I would like to say something on that. Look, in 2014, we had 4 years of rule by Yanukovych, who was a corrupt pro-Kremlin government. The Ukrainian armed forces had been hollowed out to an extent that they were 6,500 strong, compared to almost 1 million today. They were also famously corrupt, and it's believed that the reason that Crimea could be taken so easily was because the infiltration of corrupt pro-Kremlin officers in the army down in Crimea. But a second thing, remember, just after the illegal annexation of Crimea, Russia invaded Donbass in the east. They claimed that it was a civil war. It wasn't. At any one time, there was 6,000-7,000 Russian regulars, 35,000 to 40,000 Russian paid mercenaries, and a huge amount of Russian tanks and guns and so forth. So with this virtual non-existent army, the Ukrainians with volunteer units effectively fought the Russians to a standstill on the Eastern Front in Donbass. They simply were not capable of fighting a war on both fronts. There was nothing they could do about Crimea. But I can tell anybody listening to this, having lived among Ukrainians for 2 years and indeed worked at the heart of the Ukrainian government, that Crimea is absolutely existential. Mike, could I please read out something that I got in preparation for this morning, which puts an interesting light on this?
You can, but we've literally got about a minute to go, so...
it's very, very quick. Russia, through its 2014 invasion of Ukraine and its attempted annexation of Crimea, sought to undermine the bedrock of international principles shared by democratic states. It goes on and on. It goes on to say the United States calls on Russia to respect the principles to which it has long claimed to adhere to and end its occupation of Crimea. That was Mike Pompeo in 2018 when he was Donald Trump's Secretary of State.
Right. OK, that's a good point. Thank you very much indeed. I'm sure we'll be talking about it some more. Cormac Smith, former Ukrainian, former foreign ministry advisor, of course. It's a complicated deal, this. Will it come to anything? Who can say? All we know is that the deal continues to be made and the deal will continue to be argued about. Coming up in the next hour, Rosie Duffield's going to join us. We've got loads more going on. This, of course, is Talk.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yay!
8722, start your message with the word talk. Who would you send to space and why?
The person I would love to send to space would be Mr. Keir Starmer. And then I would tell the Galactic Empire that he was part of the Rebel Alliance and let them blow him away with the Death Star. No Brits was involved, no fingers could be pointed.
You carry on taking the medication, George. Yes, I'd send all the Labour government to space with a one-way ticket and throw in the SNP for being useless. They're all a bunch of... Oh, all right, fair enough.
One person, quite frankly, I think needs to go to space in a one-way journey is Jeremy Kyle. He goes on about his age one more time, how he's 60 this year, he was 59 last year, repetitively over the course of the weeks and months. We have to hear him, I'm 60 this year, I'm 60 this year.
Richard Tice, did you put that cheeky bugger up to that?
I'm hoping he's going to send me the invoice because that was absolutely brilliant.
Which MP would you send to space?
Although I get in terrible trouble if I answer that. But it's fair to say there's quite a long list.
The sad thing is about sending people into space on a one-way ticket is I don't think that we've built a spaceship big enough to take the lunatics off this planet. I mean, from the net zero loonies to the transgender loonies to the racists to the terrorists, there is just so many to the wokerati. We need some big spaceships.
Big spaceships.
Good evening. I never know how you're going to start this conversation, Jeremy.
Katy Perry went to space today, OK? Who would you send... I'd love her to say what I wanted to, but I'd never disrespect her. Who would you send to space who could never come back?
Well, I'd be happy to send Ed Miliband to space, I think.
Oh, that is an outrageous question, to I'm not even going to answer that question.
Sam Matterface, do you get the job, yeah? Go on.
No, Sam Matterface, I tell you what... There's no.
I think David Lammy would be the person I'd want to send up in space and never come back again.
Yeah, the problem is how much would the bill be for him to munch through whatever food on the way there?
Hey, it worked.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And the truth is, he doesn't have the balls.
Quote of the week, I think, voice note of the week, perhaps, from Kemi Badenoch there, speaking in the House of Commons of Prime Minister's questions to Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, basically saying that this is a guy who will not stand by the fairness of the doctrine of what the Supreme Court have actually said that we should all be doing now, because instead of actually apologising for getting it wrong, instead of apologising to Rosie Duffield for getting it wrong, and instead of actually maintaining that he now believes that he's changed his mind because the law has told him to change his mind, he instead talks about clarity, and he instead talks about now looking ahead and pulling the temperature down just in case people get too worked up. Well, I'm sorry to say that is not entirely as it should be. In terms of the truth of the matter, Keir Starmer has made a complete dog's breakfast of this entire issue. He's allowed trans activists to completely occupy and kick out members of his own party and make them frightened and make them fearful of going to the Labour Party conference. He's supported, as have many of his cabinet ministers, an ideology and a belief system which has been proven now to be illegal. And so, for heaven's sake, all we know is that Keir Starmer needs to say sorry, and he needs to say sorry much sooner than yesterday. And he didn't do it yesterday, and of course, Kemi Badenoch called him out on it. Let's get a voice note. Oh, sorry, we haven't got a voice note. We're going to talk in this... we have got a voice note. Carry on.
As you know, Mike, I've been working with Jurgen in the GB Energy office now for a while. Unfortunately, though, we do need to find a replacement for Jurgen because he now identifies Mike as a solar panel.
That's Darren, our favourite Carmarthoner from Welsh Wales, who comes in every so often with some absolute gems. GB Energy, of course, run by Jürgen Meyer, is part of a group of people meeting up this morning to discuss the future of energy security with Ed Miliband. There's a summit going on. We've been showing you pictures of 3 empty chairs. There's seemingly more people there now, but the chairs remain empty, it seems to me. We'll bring you updated news on that when it comes. Also, we'll be talking about lots of other stories coming up in this hour, including rip-off tickets for Oasis concerts this summer. Loads and loads of fans have been ripped off to the tune of about £2 million. We've got ministers over in America with Rachel Reeves offering to cut ties with the tariffs that are going on right now between America and Britain, and to try and get people from America to come and invest in this country because it's a shining example of economic prosperity. I'm not sure where they got that from. Meanwhile, Ursula von der Leyer's coming into town. She's going to be talking to Keir Starmer about how we can get back into the European Union in all but name. That's actually what he's up to. 0344 499 1000 is the number. It's 5 minutes past 9. This is Morning Glory. This from Mick in Ely. He says, morning, Mike. Well, actually, it's the point of Prime Minister's questions. Starmer never answers any of the questions. He is full of negativity and constantly blaming others for his mistakes. Day by day, this country is failing. And similarly, Becky from Devon says, Mike, that PMQs was so bad from Starmer, I cringed for him. And let's be honest, he doesn't deserve my cringe. His absolute refusal to apologise, him repeating his sound bites instead of answering the questions, and his repeat attacks on reform. Where did all that come from? Is someone scared? It was fun, though. Absolutely right. It is extraordinary. Let's talk to David Maddox, policy editor of The Independent. And let's start off, David, a very good morning to you, with Kemi Badenoch asking if Keir Starmer was wrong when he said that it was the law that trans women are women.
Mr. Speaker, does the Prime Minister now accept that when he said that it was the law that trans women were women, he was wrong?
Well, Mr. Speaker, let me be clear. I welcome the Supreme Court ruling on this issue. It brings clarity and it will give confidence to women and, of course, to service providers. The Equality and Human Rights Commission will now issue updated guidance, and it's important that that happens and that all service providers then act accordingly. This government's approach and my approach has been as follows: to support and implement the Supreme Court ruling, and we will, to to continue to protect single-sex spaces based on biological sex, and we will, but also to ensure that trans people are treated with respect, and we will, and to ensure that everybody is given dignity in their everyday lives. I do think this is the time now to lower the temperature, to move forward and to conduct this debate with the care and compassion that it deserves, and I think that should unite the whole House.
Yes, he thinks he should unite the whole House, which is not something he normally wants to do. David, that was pretty much a great example of Keir Starmer not answering a Prime Minister's question, wasn't it?
It really was, actually. And whatever side you take on this issue, I'm afraid Labour have come out of the last few days on it very badly. It just makes you kind of think that really, it plays into this kind of characterisation that they don't really believe in much, that they'll say what is convenient at the time and what they think it will be the easiest route for them. And, you know, frankly, I think Kemi was right. It was a very good performance by Kemi.
I think her best to date, wasn't it?
Yeah, best one to date. It's a strong area for her. It's her kind of comfort zone, this issue. But she was right that Rosie Duffield, the former Labour MP for Canterbury, does deserve an apology.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that, because some of the treatment that had to be meted out by the Labour Party to Rosie Duffield was despicable. She asked for meetings with Keir Starmer, wasn't given one. She's also come out previously and said, you know, this is a guy who has a problem with women. You know, and it remains to be that the Labour government and the Labour Party is still riddled with people who hate the likes of Rosie Duffield for having a belief system and now having an understanding of the law which is better than they did.
Well, indeed, and let's be frank about this, it's not just the Labour Party, actually. The Liberal Democrats have been tied up in all sorts of legal cases around these issues. I mean, they managed to kick out one of their candidates for being Christian and not believing in all these sorts of business just before the election as well, and they tried to ban women from attending their conference.
Right.
The Greens have
you kind of expect the Lib Dems to be a bit mad, don't you? I mean, the trouble with Labour now is that Labour are now the government, and so they need to take life a little bit more seriously.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, the Lib Dems have got 70-odd MPs. They're clearly the third party in British politics in terms of MP numbers, at least.
Well, they are for the moment, but I don't suppose that will last. I mean, whenever there's a boost for the Lib Dems, they always think we're going to be the next government, and it never happens, and they lose their seats again.
Indeed.
I mean, that's usually what happens. But you know,
what I'm saying is that this is a problem across party. I mean, let's be honest. The Conservatives as well had their own issues on this. I mean, Kemi's taken a very strong line on it. And a very clear line on it, and she should be praised for that, actually. But you know, there were others who took opposite views who were in charge of that portfolio. I mean, I'm thinking about Penny Mordaunt, in particular.
Absolutely.
So
well, it was one of those believe it or not sort of parliamentary periods where, you know, wokeists had sort of taken over the civil service. Everybody who had worked in a private company or a public sector company was subjected to diversity, you know, lessons and, you know, all sorts of statements being made that we were open to, you know, all genders and all, you know, it was all, I mean, that was kind of where the country got to because it got hijacked by these trans activists who are proving themselves to be nothing more really than completely ghastly individuals who want to walk around the centre of London urinating all over everything and shouting at women.
And insisting on pronouns and so forth. I mean, but I'm not sure I share your optimism that this has gone away.
Oh no, I don't think it's gone away, but I think
division still exists. I think it's still a strong part of corporate behaviour in the United Kingdom and Western countries as a whole.
But much less so than it was, I think, and I think this ruling will also make it less so because so far, you know, as far as we know, and as far as the people I've spoken to since the ruling of last Wednesday, it is now the law that a trans woman is not a woman. Therefore, that trans woman cannot be allowed into a female-only space, and a trans woman cannot be, you know, on a female-only ward in a hospital. You know, that might be a battleground, and it might be taking a while for that to happen. But there's no doubt what the law is.
Yeah, no, it isn't. But it's interesting. The pressure now mounting within Labour. Let's go back to Labour to look at changing the law. So, you know, these are. I'm not sure that the issue is done and dusted.
Yeah.
Yet.
Well, I think if the Prime Minister, even as weak as he is and as indecisive as he is, has come out and said that the law is now very clear and the Supreme Court has given him and everybody else clarity, then I don't see how he can take anybody inside of his own party suggesting that they should overturn it.
No, but, you know, are you saying that Keir Starmer's never changed his mind and you turned on?
Well, I'm saying that Keir Starmer has... No, I'm saying that he constantly changes his mind, David, but what he does do is he clings on to legal descriptions of things in the same way that he did in Southport when he said we couldn't call the suspect at the time a terrorist or a terrorist suspect because he didn't fit the definition of a terrorist, which was clearly nonsense. He can hide behind this because it is now the definition as handed down by the Supreme Court, which is what he says he lives by.
Well, indeed. But I don't know. I wouldn't rule out Labour trying to change.
Well, I mean, there might be Labour MPs who will try and change it, but Labour as a group, I don't think will, as long as Keir Starmer's in charge of them. But we shall see. Let's talk about his other weakness, which is the European Union. He's inviting Ursula von der Leyen into Downing Street today to have a discussion about closer ties to the EU, which has made an awful lot of people who voted to leave the EU a bit unhappy.
Well, indeed, but I mean, obviously at the Independent we're quite pleased about this because we want a Brexit reset.
Well, you used to work at the Express, and presumably you would have been pleased about it.
Indeed, yes, yeah.
Let's not get carried away.
I have a little bit of a split personality on this one.
Yeah,
but
tell me about it.
But it's, you know, he's. There's certainly. I mean, the Independent, we would like him to go much further than he would. But there is, I think...
Well, you're not in favour of democracy at the Independent now, then, now that you've got that. Eh?
Well, no, of course we are, but... You know,
do you want another referendum?
Times change. But I think there is a need for some sort of Brexit reset because the trading relationships isn't working. I do think we need to be closer in terms of defence, which seems to be the priority of this particular round of talks at the moment.
Well, I mean, the problem with being closer on defence, though, David, is that we haven't got much of a defence department to talk about, and neither has anybody else in Europe, which is why Donald Trump has been saying you've got to increase the amount of GDP that you spend on defence, which is why European countries are all doing it. But they wouldn't have done it if it hadn't been for Donald Trump suggesting it.
No, I wouldn't disagree with that at all, but I do think that cooperation on defence is necessary going forward, given the problems coming from Russia.
Yeah, but a lot of people think that what should not be happening is that if there is to be closer ties on defence, we should not be trading that for more fishing rights for the French, for example.
Well, even it's interesting, even the commissioner, and I've forgotten the person's name, the European commissioner, in charge of these matters, has expressed frustration at the French demands that we exchange fish for giving them better defence in Europe. So I think we actually have, for once, have some allies in this respect, in Brussels itself, much to everybody's surprise.
Yeah, quite. I'm just going to interrupt you for a second, David. Ed Miliband has just stood up at the Energy Security Summit. Let's have a quick listen to what he's saying.
And every one of you who have made the trip here, we truly appreciate your presence, and we really look forward to the discussions over the coming 2 days. We also have leaders from more than 50 global businesses with us, and I want to thank all of you for everything you do to help create energy security for our countries and our world. And we also have NGOs and civil society groups from around the world who are here with us, who play an important role in ensuring accountability of governments. I also want to pay a specific thank you to the official partners of the summit, Iberdrola, Scottish Power, National Grid, SSE and Urenco. And if I may, I want to also thank the teams at the International Energy Agency and across the UK government who have worked incredibly hard to pull this event together. It is some feat of organisation. And I want, if I may, also to pay a particular tribute to Fatih Birol. Fatih, your leadership of the IEA for more than a decade now has been marked by your commitment to rigour, to values and to multilateral cooperation, and that is why the IEA is so central to the global discussion on energy, and I want to thank you, and perhaps the audience could show our appreciation for Fatih and the work he does.
So Ed Miliband's decided to start his speech and go backwards, right? Because he's starting with the thanks at the end. This is what you're doing at the end of the speech. You thank people for coming. So anyway, that's the Green Summit over and done with. Thanks for flying in from all over the world and increasing your carbon footprint. David, you know, mad Ed Miliband seems to think that it's a good idea to basically tax a load of energy firms, because that won't have any effect whatsoever on the price of fish or indeed energy. But he's not now going to buy any solar panels from China, and he thinks he's going to make them here.
Well, and this morning he was also suggesting that he's in favour of zonal pricing, which means that those of us living in the south of England are probably going to have bill hikes, which you'll be interested to know that former Labour donor and Green industrialist Dale Vince has written to for the Independent saying how bonkers that idea is. So even Dale Vince thinks that idea is mad.
Well, Dale Vince thinks most of Ed Miliband's ideas are mad. I mean, they're not on the same page at all on hardly anything. Really, because you know, it's pop quiz. Ed Miliband is mad. You know, he literally hasn't had an idea that's been any use for the. And I mean, even as British Steel was signing a deal with the government to have the government take it over, he was claiming that as some kind of victory for net zero, even though they're going to keep the blast furnaces open. I mean, it doesn't make it. Well, he comes out with stuff that doesn't make any sense.
What I'm still waiting for is the £300 off my bill that they promised at the election.
I think you might be waiting quite a long time for that, David. Thank you very much indeed. David Maddox, political editor of The Independent there, talking about Ed Miliband, and who is speaking now and will no doubt speak for quite a long time. Should we have another check back and see what he's saying?
Every country faces its own energy security challenges and its own constraints. And each country will pursue its own pathway, following its national interest in securing its energy supplies. Different pathways, and I think this is a really important point for this conference, different pathways for different nations should be respected. And we will all get a chance to reflect on our different national circumstances in our discussions over the coming days. But here is the key thing. Whatever our national pathways, I do believe that we share a fundamental belief that shared challenges invite shared solutions. Multilateral cooperation can make us stronger, not weaker, in our own individual national interest. Third point. Hopefully this is also a uniting idea. I believe that we gathered here are the optimists about what we can achieve for our society. Business, government, civil society. I believe we are, in this energy sector, the optimists. Abundant energy can raise living standards, economic growth, and deliver for today's and future generations of citizens.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, it's still gibberish, isn't it? It's absolute rubbish. I believe we are the optimists. And so what? How many days is this going on for? The Green Summit. I mean, unbelievable, isn't it? Let's get a voice note from Jane on the EU.
Hi, good morning, Mike. It's Jay from Stockport. Regarding Keir Starmer and his love for the EU, what's so annoying is when you see the images on the television of the French border force and giving them life jackets and pushing the boats out for them and helping them on the way, and stood there doing absolutely nothing. Then recently we've got about, oh, let's do a deal. Oh, yeah, you come and fish wherever you like, and stifling the fishing rights of our UK fishermen, and it's just causing frustrations. Then he's got von der Leyen coming over. What he doesn't realise is he thinks he's really popular, and the only reason why he's popular is because they're going, oh my days, he's just asleep at the wheel, go and pick his pocket. So every time when he goes and he embraces Macron, honestly, I could punch people's lights out, because why are you hugging somebody that's robbing us blind?
It's a very good point, Jane. Thank you very much indeed. Why are you hugging him anyway? You know, why does he hug so many people? He hugs Zelensky, hugs Macron. I don't know. You're absolutely right. Jane from on the EU there, very, very true. Morning, Mike, says Els Bells. Supreme Court ruling in London Marathon hospitals, etc. All of these organisations have already been breaking the law. The law didn't change. It was already there. So as a consequence, they should all be prosecuted for breaking the law in the past. And if they continue to do so, it's simple. They broke the law. Absolutely right. And Gary says, Mike, you would get more sense out of 3 empty chairs than you would get from Mad Miliband and Fruit Loop Jurgen. Says Gary in Northants. Haven't seen any sign of Jurgen yet. But apparently they've got a job opportunities page on the website for GB Energy. But there aren't any job opportunities, I'm afraid. We'll keep you updated if one comes along in case you want to apply for it. This is the Morning Glory.
Exactly are the rights that trans people now won't have as a result of this ruling. So I don't know, can you think of any? What rights are they going to be denied as a result of this ruling?
Well, this is the thing, yeah. I mean, they were it was almost like they were told that they had access to all of these things. They could be in these sports as, you know, the opposite sex. They could do all that. And now they're being told, well, no, you can't. But they were never rights in the first place.
And so it will be interesting, as you say, to see if this is in some way further tested.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 25 minutes past 9, and we are here, of course, all the way through until 10 o'clock. About another half an hour before Julie Hartley-Brewer comes here. And, of course, we'll keep you updated with all of the news coming in from the Green Summit. Ed Miliband's up talking. I'm not quite sure if he's going to be making any sense. We'll let you know. Raver says this, Mike, you have to love these union bosses when they speak about people making sacrifices while their income doesn't get affected. Yeah, we were speaking to Unite a little bit earlier on. There's literally 5 weeks now worth of strike action that's been going on full square in Birmingham, and the streets are pretty rank, and they were pretty rank before that because there's been some industrial action one way or the other going on since about the beginning of the year. Let's talk to Ayub Khan now, independent MP for Birmingham Perry Bar. Ayub, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Thanks very much for talking to us. I'm just looking at, we spoke to Unite this morning. They said they've had a meeting yesterday, which didn't really resolve much, but he said they were tantalisingly close to a deal. What can you tell us?
Well, when Birmingham City Council's new Labour leader, Councillor John Cotton, came to post in 2022, he promised the city transformation, and he's not wrong there because he's transformed Birmingham City Council into a landfill.
Yeah.
We keep hearing two different versions. You have Unite representatives saying that there is a deal which we're willing to strike. And then Councillor Cotton has said on all the mainstream media that no worker will lose any money. So people are confused as to why isn't a deal being struck if no bin workers are going to lose any income. We know that's about £8,000 for some of the bin workers.
Right. Yeah, that's indeed what Unite said. They said, look, there's a disparity, shall we say, between what the leader's been saying publicly and what they're being told in behind closed doors of a meeting. And he said, you know, they're pretty close on almost everything. They just need to get that clarification, as Keir Starmer would call it, that there isn't going to be any loss of pay to any of the bin men.
I mean, yeah, I think people need to put pen to paper, because it's one thing saying something to win over the hearts and minds of the residents, but it's completely different when you're behind closed doors. I think if Councillor Cotton is honest, that's the leader of the Labour-run group here in Birmingham, he needs to put that down in a contract to say that no bin workers are going to suffer any reduction in pay. That's what he said, but I'm not too sure that's what he's willing to put on paper.
No, that's the trouble. And I mean, this is now a massive health scare, isn't it? I mean, there's a piece in the Telegraph today saying there's a sort of a secret report that was published or given to Birmingham City Council saying that this would be a major health hazard, not just for the obvious, you know, rat infestation and the disease that comes from that, but also, you know, harms to people's mental health, difficulties for emergency vehicles for getting around the city because there's so much rubbish. And I mean, I don't know I've not been up there. I don't know what it's like in your constituency, but it looks pretty awful.
Well, I represent a very diverse constituency. You've got affluent parts, and then you've got inner city communities. It's improving, I can say that, but not to the level which you would expect. There is a significant health hazard. I put to the Minister the other day that whilst he was boasting about clearing 26,000 tonnes, well, we know there was 22,000 tonnes on the streets before we managed to get all the lorries out, and we know that waste is a continuous thing. And so there's still a lot of rubbish. There's still a lot of rat infestation. We know that Rentokil and other private companies have said that they've had an increase in around 60 to 70% in terms of calls. And that's a serious health risk when you've got rats. We've had people with vehicles having to take them into the garages because rats have gone in under the bonnet and have stripped away some of the cables. So it's really not just a health hazard, it's causing real issues on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to walk around the streets like that, and presumably the rats are getting into people's houses and stuff. I mean, shouldn't the government be doing more? I mean, people have said to me, the problem with this government is that they've got so many members of Unite inside of the government, they don't really want to take on the union.
Well, and I don't disagree with that. I mean, they are conflicted, and that's one of the problems that you have. Residents don't care what the political dynamics are. At the end of the day, they've paid 10% increase in council tax last year, 7.5% this year, and they're not getting the service. They're being shortchanged. Keir Starmer has been very, very slow to act, as though the 1.2 million population of Birmingham don't matter. We were called, all parliamentarians were recalled, as you will recall, to help out the Scunthorpe workers.
Yeah.
But Birmingham, it seems to be neglected, not just by the Labour-run council here, but the government as well.
And the Labour-run council has been pretty, shall we say, destitute itself in running the budget, hasn't it?
Abysmal. They just have no understanding of financial management. And that's one of the problems. I mean, I sympathise with the workers, to be frank, because this is a problem which has been created by this administration, by its mismanagement, financial mismanagement, and they're simply looking for scapegoating the workers. And so I sympathise with the bin workers. I mean, nobody wants to take a pay cut of about £8,000. Some of these bin workers wouldn't be able to pay their mortgage.
Yeah.
So, there's definitely incompetence.
There is, absolutely right. Good. Thanks for talking to us. Herb Khan, independent MP for Birmingham, Perry Bar, I should say. Let's get a conversation going with Chris, who's in Buckinghamshire. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Mike.
How you doing?
I'm doing good, thanks. Well, as good as you can in this country. I just wanted to suggest that the organisers of Park Run and the marathons should create a new category.
Yes.
Called the biological woman category.
Okay.
Because that would be fair to women then.
Couldn't you just call it women's category, though?
No, because trans women are entering the marathon and the park run saying they're women.
Yeah, but the Supreme Court's just said that they're not. So Park Run should say, sorry, the Supreme Court says you're not women. You can have your own category if you want. which is people who think they're women, and then you can run in that.
No, what the Supreme Court said is that when we say woman, we mean biological woman. So I think we need to start having biological woman written a lot more in society, perhaps even on toilets. These toilets are for biological women because these trans people are very difficult. And unless you make it perfectly clear to them that it's biological women only, they will say, I'm a woman. They won't take any notice otherwise.
Well, they'll be breaking the law then, and then that's when it starts to get tricky, isn't it? And then it's a question of who then sort of believes in actually carrying out the law itself, because that's why even Keir Starmer says, you know, there's no dispute now. There's no chance that you can pretend that you're a woman. You're either a biologically born woman or you're not. But a lot of women I know wouldn't like to be called biological women, Chris.
Okay, no, that's fair enough. It's just that this morning you said that when the marathon people have come on and said that men can identify as women, even though the Supreme Court has spoken, and I just thought it might be a way of...
Yeah, no, it's a good idea. I just wonder if people might get more sort of upset by having to have the word biological written in front of the word woman, because that's what they are. Let's get a voice note from John on the bin strike.
Morning, Mike. Great show as ever. John here, down in Derbyshire. Listening to this union, Jobsworth, militant, you know, this is what happens when you put Labour in charge and you give the unions the power. You start paying one sector, every sector wants it, and they just start to run the economy, and they run it into the ground. Cheers, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons that they're in such a bad place in Birmingham is because of the fact that the Birmingham City Council are pretty much bankrupt. Samantha is in Scunthorpe. Hi, Samantha.
Morning, Mike.
Morning.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to say that, and I might be wrong here, but I thought I'd heard regarding the Birmingham bin strike in recent weeks, I thought I'd heard somebody say on the radio that, you know, the council had said, you know, nobody needs to lose the money. Yeah. You know, they can maintain the same level of pay, but it might mean moving to a different role. Well, you know, the devil's in the details, isn't it? The union guy doesn't mention that. He just says, oh, they've told us that we don't need to lose any money, so why don't they put that in writing?
Yes.
But I'm just wondering if you go down into it, no, they don't, but it might mean moving somewhere else, and they'll not want that, perhaps.
Right.
You know.
That's a good point. Yeah, it may well be that. There's definitely somewhere between what the head of the council is saying publicly and what is being said behind closed doors. I mean, that seems to be a problem as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to make that point. That's
yes.
all.
OK,
yeah.
Samantha, very good point. Thanks for making it. Terry in Birmingham says this, Mike, the strikers are getting strike pay. Don't forget these blokes get pensions, the likes of which people can only wish for. This is why household rates are so high. It's the same for all public service employees, unlike those working in the private sector who are actually paying for it. And Zarina says, could the people of Birmingham bring a case to the courts for all the mess and danger brought on by the union creating the strike? Well, I think so. I wouldn't be at all surprised if there was some, you know, lawyer that would take up the case and take up the cudgel, because it must be horrific to be living in that kind of situation where you've got rats climbing up under the bonnet of the car, eating their way through the cable so you can't drive the bleeding thing, rats presumably entering homes and threatening children, taking bites out of people, taking a bite out of your dog or your cat. You know, the rats are getting bigger. And the smell is getting worse, and the whole situation appears to be spiralling out of control. And when you get Unite saying we're going to have another meeting with ACAS, but not until the end of next week, that means it will go for another week, and that'll be practically 2 months solid from the beginning of March to the end of April. Forget about what went before, but what went before was 3 months of 2 months rather of sort of sporadic striking. So some of that rubbish has been on the streets for nearly 4 months. That's what we're talking about here, and it's pretty disgusting to be the second city in Britain, in England, for Birmingham to be that famous for trash, which is what it is. This is Morning Glory.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 9:38. It's 9:38. Are you joking? Where's the time gone? John in Germany says, wouldn't it be glorious if there was a power cut at this Energy Summit meeting? Absolutely. And Steve says, watching the guy with the Hoover at the Energy Summit, I wonder if he'll be back with a shovel after the event to scoop up all the rubbish that we spewed from the stage. Let's go over to Simon, who's in Devon. Hello, Simon.
Hi, you all right, mate?
Yeah, very good, sir. What can I do for you?
No, I'm a little bit disgusted by some of the attitudes of some of the people regarding the transgender issue.
Okay.
I mean, the fact that we're, again, repeating history, but this time we're segregating a group of people who may have trauma, who may have mental health conditions, who may need more help. I, for instance, am friends with a person who, you know, she hates.
She hates what?
She hates being a male.
Right.
She was born into the wrong body, and I just think you've got callers coming on here, and
your line keeps breaking up, son.
No,
sorry, I'll come back. We'll try and get you in a better line because I'd like to hear what you have to say. But we've got Rosie Duffield MP here, independent, former Labour MP, of course, of Canterbury. Rosie, very good morning to you.
Hi, Mike.
Thanks very much for joining us. It's been an interesting couple of days, I imagine, for you. You did note on your Twitter account, I saw that sometimes you forget the cameras are on you when Keir Starmer's talking about you.
Well, they shouldn't be on me. They should be on him. So it's really unusual to see a cutaway to another MP. And my bad, I completely forgot that you do forget that in your workplace, whenever you're in the chamber, the cameras are on them.
Yeah, but I don't think it's a bad thing because you could see from your expression that you were not exactly impressed with what he had to say. And to be honest, not very many people were. So I think your expression kind of said it all, really, because he was, even for Starmer, particularly robotic and ridiculous yesterday, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, those are obviously just the latest lines. And of course, he was going to have to accept the judgment of the Supreme Court. You know, that's literally the law.
Right.
I think it's just the fact that he seems to have kind of been on a journey and we're not really sure. It's flip-flopped so many times. You know, it's not exactly clear political leadership, really.
It really isn't. Because as many people said, if you really need to be told by a court what a woman is, and only then can you even say the words, and even now he hasn't really actually said the words, it tells you an awful lot about him, doesn't it? That he needs a legal framework for pretty much everything that he does.
Yeah, I mean, it's an odd approach to politics because obviously the Equality Act since 2010 hasn't changed.
Right.
But many organisations were, I heard my friend Venice on your show earlier, and she sort of put it exactly right, that lots of organisations, including the NHS and other government departments, were sort of interpreting the Equality Act according to Stonewall and Mermaids and other activist groups, rather than the actual intention of the law. And that's a 15-year-old law. Things have changed socially so much, but we haven't adapted to that. And now it almost seems, you know, we've really got to sort of learn it all over again.
Right. And I mean, do you worry that some of these organisations like the NHS are going to kind of push back on this? Because there still seems to be an argument in the common sort of space, I suppose, if you like, where people are saying, well, you know, we are going to make an exception for this or for that or for these people, and because we're going to... You can't really interpret the law now that the Supreme Court has said what it is, surely.
No, I mean, you shouldn't have done anyway. Those people shouldn't have done anyway. But as parliamentarians, we didn't really pick this up. I think this was our fault. You know, we weren't watching what organisations were doing, and that's all the last few governments since the law came in.
Yeah.
And they can't just decide, I'm afraid, that the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, has said that this law applies to biological men and biological women. Organisations can't just decide that they're going to ignore that because they're breaking the law.
Yeah, exactly. And how dismayed were you when you saw Bridget Phillipson the day before talking about how Labour had always stood up for protection of single-sex spaces for women? Because I think many of us weren't entirely sure that was true.
No, I mean, it's not true. We can all see it. There's memes and GIFs and clips of interviews. I mean, I think that's the worst thing that politicians can do. We get accused of all being the same, all being liars. And if you are doing exactly that and the public are watching, particularly during an election period. It's not great, is it? We can all see and hear what people have said before, including on this channel, where lots of people have squirmed when asked the question about what is a woman.
Yeah, exactly right. And I mean, in terms of that question now, I still don't see Keir Starmer actually defining it, because when he was being quizzed yesterday by Kemi Badenoch, who I thought did particularly well, very much better than she has done in the past, he just falls back on this kind of clarification is a great thing, and it's all clarified for us now, and so now we can make sure that the guidance is right. And it's like, you don't need guidance, surely, to know what a woman is.
I think that's often sort of thrown at Keir Starmer, isn't it? That he's very robotic, that he sticks to the letter of the law, and that, of course, that was his former job. That's great. But when you're a politician, you need to at least seem to come across as someone who understands how people feel about this, you know, and I don't see any reflection of that from him over most issues. But this one has been particularly vexatious and horrible. And his backbenchers, a lot of them, the newer ones, seem to be very annoyed with him on the other side of the arguments to me. So I think, you know, he's not in a great position, but I think having a stand on it would probably be a good idea, and giving the idea that you understand and empathise with either or both sides and what they've both been through would probably be a good idea, actually.
Yes. Do you think that the sort of the terminology is difficult and wrong as well? I mean, would it be difficult, would it be different if, in fact, you didn't call trans women, you call them something else?
I don't know what else you could call them. I mean, I guess that's up to them themselves, you know, what they want to be called. But, you know, there has to be a distinction. You know, lots of women like me don't want to be called cis women. We're just women, you know. So I think you do have to be sort of careful of that kind of thing. And, you know, it's not for me to tell trans people what to call themselves at all. But yeah, I mean, the law stated very clearly, biological women, biological men. You know, the certificate doesn't really make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, we had a caller because we were talking about the marathon and stuff, and how, you know, a lot of the athletic organisations are still allowing, you know, trans women to run in women's category. And she said maybe we should start calling them biological women, but I think that's a step backwards, isn't it? Because surely
we don't need to do that, do we? We are just women and men. And, you know, I think if you're stepping outside of those categories that we all know, then, yeah, why not call yourself a trans identified or trans women or trans men? That's okay, man, that's okay. But I think sport has been one of those areas, hasn't it, where there's distinct physical advantages to men in sport that women don't have. You know, we're different, we're built differently, and we've seen so many cases of injustice and unfairness in sport. So recategorising that so that only women can run in the women's part of a race, it's just common sense.
Well, you would think so. And, I mean, you wrote a piece in the Mail yesterday saying you weren't expecting an apology from Keir Starmer. You didn't get one in public. Has he ever tried to contact you in private to apologise for the way you were treated?
Absolutely not, no. And, I mean, I don't personally care that much about an apology. It's the Labour Party that put me through all of the things they put me through. And the guy who was the chief investigator of my case for 13 months and other MPs is now an MP who was sort of sent to a very safe seat. So that's a bit galling sometimes to see the support that he probably gets from the Labour Party. But it's ordinary people that were thrown out of the Labour Party, stopped from standing as councillors, stopped from being officers in their local branch. They're the ones that are owed an apology.
Yeah, and Lisa Nandy, of course, who now says that she understands that she might have misled herself on what the law actually was. She now says, or she did say rather, that people who were formed parts of hate groups like you should be fired and kicked out of the party. I mean, that was how strongly she felt about it.
Yeah, I mean, women and men who just want what we've known in history from year dot, that women are women and men are men. I don't think you can suddenly start revising facts like that. And, you know, that's a weird way of putting it.
And what do you think about the way the NHS has reacted to all of this as well? Because there will be some public sector bodies and some schools and universities maybe where it's going to be a sort of a long road to get them to recognise that they were wrong.
I think it's really difficult, and we've seen nurses, it's the ordinary low-paid workers doing ordinary jobs, let's not forget, who've been most frightened to speak up. And this, I'm afraid, this is partly an issue of class and privilege, And we don't talk about that enough, I don't think, when we discuss this issue. But it's always the people that can be let go that are let go. And we don't hear about them. We don't hear their names in the papers, which is why the Darlington nurses are so brave, because they've put this front and centre, you know, and we know now that those nurses, all they wanted to do is get changed in private.
Yeah.
A male doctor was allowed to go into their space. That's outrageous.
Right.
The NHS can't just do that. We all pay for the NHS. They are accountable directly to the Health Secretary.
Yeah, and the BMA have said that there's no absolute necessity for a doctor to declare their gender or their sex, and so if you are a female,
that's outrageous.
If you're a female,
outrageous.
Yeah, if you're a female patient who wants a female doctor, surely you deserve to get a female doctor.
Absolutely. If you are a female with especially intimate examinations and you want a female with a female's body and a female's lived experience, you may or may not have experienced abuse yourself, but you might just want your own privacy and your own dignity, and that's allowed as well. And I think if there's any way that you can ask for that kind of healthcare provider to be a woman, if you are a woman, or a man, if you're a man, you know, then so what? Why not?
Yeah, exactly right. Finally, you were wearing a little dinosaur brooch on your jacket yesterday, and from what's on your social media page from Madeline Grant in the Telegraph, was that a message to David Lammy?
It was a joke. I mean, poor David Lammy, he phoned up and apologised when the whole dinosaur gate thing sort of exploded. But we all, you know, us women on my side enjoy it. It's fun. It's just a silly thing that we've kind of embraced, and we call ourselves dinosaurs anyway.
Yeah. And how are you enjoying being an independent MP? Is it better than being over on the other side?
It really is, I'm afraid. You know, I've the party that I love, that I've always been involved with, I feel, you know, I've lost touch with, and that they've kind of let me down in lots of ways. And I didn't resign over this issue. It was just one of many. All the things I've been campaigning as and against as a Labour MP and a Labour activist most of my life seems to be going backwards in this Labour government, and it's profoundly disappointing. I'm certainly not the only Labour MP or ex-Labour MP who feels like that.
Indeed. Rosie, good to talk to you. Thanks so much for joining us, and good luck with it all. Rosie Duffield, independent, former Labour MP for Canterbury, of course. We'll bring you more coming up after the next break. We've got Sacha Lord. He's going to talk about the hospitality business and how there might be a chink of light coming through at the end of the tunnel.
Hi, I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and I've got a message for you. Welcome back to this blockbuster edition of What Just Happened. It really is a good one, I think. It's so funny that people keep calling me Meghan Markle because it's Meghan Sussex now.
Flynn has said, Samara, I agree with you all the time, but you're just boring.
I refuse to work for ITV ever again.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:53. We are here, of course, until 10 o'clock. Julie Hartley-Brewer coming in very soon. Matt says, if energy costs are low, the government gets less tax. Taking this into consideration, why didn't the government lower the VAT on energy to reflect their promise? Well, we did ask for that many, many moons ago, if you remember, that one of the things that they could do to help all sorts of businesses, including, in fact, those in the nighttime economy and those in hospitality in particular, who had high prices of energy coming in through the door, could really benefit from a wipeout of VAT on it. But let's talk to Sasha Lord, nighttime economy advisor, knows a thing or two about how the businesses are all going. Sasha, very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Morning, Mike.
So there's a bit of I said that this was a bit of a chink of light, perhaps, in the rather dark days that hospitality has been facing, and probably for people with common sense and brains, not that surprising.
Well, it is, and it is. You know, just to reiterate, as you said, it's a slight chink out of months and months of absolute misery, especially on the back of the disastrous budget.
Yeah.
But local large-scale brewery in Greater Manchester reported in the last 2 weeks, in their beer gardens across the whole of the region, they were up between 35 and 64% year on year. That is huge. That is a huge, huge boost for the economy. The flip side is, obviously, the beer gardens are packed when the weather's out and it's nice and hot. But who wants to sit indoors inside a pub when the sun's out? So when you didn't have a beer garden or you didn't have a car park where you could put tables and chairs out, unfortunately, they were quiet. Again, the good news for those with beer gardens is next week the weather is looking like it's going to turn to sun again. So again, another chink of positivity.
Yes, exactly right. But what are the figures like at the moment in terms of hospitality businesses, pubs in particular, I suppose, going out of business? Because the rate of that was quite big last year, wasn't it?
Mike, it's completely disastrous. The budget was the final nail in the coffin.
Yeah.
No one expected the increase in national insurance, which, by the way, people are now doing their monthly payroll. It's the end of April, and people are now saying to me, wow, we're starting to realise how badly this is affecting us. You've got that, plus on top of that, an increase in business rates.
Yeah.
It's double whammy. And what a kick in the teeth for hospitality when the Labour Party was saying, we are the party for hospitality, we're going to support you. Well, they're clearly not. And my point I was making yesterday, Mike, on social media was, look, you are the home of common sense, aren't you?
We are.
And I'm saying, OK, it's great to have these beer gardens, but the vast majority of pubs don't have beer gardens. And we all remember the alfresco dining come COVID, when we had streets in all our towns and city centres, when it was fun and we had tables and chairs out on the streets. Well, let's do that again for hospitality. You know, you cannot financially support them. So what you can do this summer is increase their capacity. Let them have more footfall, give them tables and give them chairs, expedite the law, cut the red tape, and that would be a huge boost for the sector.
Yeah, and does that come down a lot of it to local councils and how sort of jobs-worthy they are in terms of whether you can't have that there? I mean, I remember during the COVID times, we used to go to a pub around the corner and a sort of marshal appeared one day to say, you know, you're standing too close to the pub. You'll have to go and stand over there. And we were like, it's literally 5 foot difference. What are you doing? And the pub owner said to us, this guy turns up every now and again and just makes life difficult for us.
It is completely ridiculous. It actually needs changing by central government.
Yeah.
But I was the person during that COVID period who challenged Matt Hancock, at the time was a health secretary. Dropped the 10 p.m. curfew and the substantial meal ruling, the Scotch egg ruling. And the more I look back to some of the laws that we all kept to during that period, it was ludicrous. It really was. And It's unforgivable. And hospitality is still carrying this debt, this burden of debt that they incurred during that period. We were the first to close, we were the last to open, especially nightclubs.
Yeah.
And we're still suffering. There's a stat that we could lose in the next 12 months, up to 9,000 UK pubs. And, you know, a pub is not just a pound to pint, it's about a pint. It is part of our social fabric to life. And it's devastating. It's heartbreaking, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, I talked to my good friend Donald McLeod up in Scotland, who runs the garage, you know, and he's had a terribly rough time of it, including at one point Nicola Sturgeon saying, well, you can reopen the dance floor, but people will have to wear masks to dance. And he's going, you know, have you gone mad? It's absolutely ridiculous. And one of my favourites was where you had to wear a mask if you were walking to the toilet in the restaurant, but you had to take it off to sit down so you could eat, because obviously the COVID fumes don't reach you below waist height.
Well, I can beat that, Mike. There was one I won't mention the politician because it's embarrassing. They suggested it was safe to be on a huge packed dance floor, but then when you queued at the bar, you had to wear your mask.
Right. Yeah.
Still to this day, I'm thinking, you know, where are you coming from? Where were you coming from?
Yeah, you'd think they've been on the old fumes, but there we are. Listen, Sasha, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed, Sasha Lord, the commonsensical man who knows a thing or two about opening a pub and why they make money. Julie Hartley-Brewer's here.
Well, hello. We love Sasha Lord.
He's great,
he was
isn't he?
such a great campaigner to try and reopen the country during lockdown years.
And he's saying that, you know, we're now seeing beer gardens, profits up. You know, people want to go out and drink in the sunshine.
Well, again, you know, I always say also, we need to get our young people out, because one of the conversations today is about, you know, social media and all of this. Like, I think one of the biggest problems, we talk about mental health, you know, all the time, and all of this, and all these kids who are so unhappy. And people need to be out and about and be with other people. And that's what pubs were. Public houses, pubs were places where people, and still are, we can meet up and we can talk and be social. Have a drink, relax. And I keep saying, young people,